Alrighty, welcome back. Actually, I shouldn't say back. This is the first installment of Wuxia Wednesdays. Wuxia? I'm not actually sure how that's pronounced. Uh, I don't know that I've ever heard it spoken aloud, or if I did not hear it. Let's see what Dr. Google says. Pronunciation of Wuxia. Okay, well, that wasn't particularly informative, but okay, that's completely different. Uh, so it could be Wuxia. I'm not clicking on that link. That link is clearly. See, that definitely says Wuxia. Whatever. We're going with it. Wuxia. Which is basically martial fantasy. So think Kung Fu dudes in a somewhat fantastical, um, usually ancient Chinese setting, though it doesn't have to be ancient Chinese by any stretch of the imagination. Um, so this is going to be Legends of the Condor Heroes, which is fairly famous. Even somebody who isn't familiar with kung fu movies may have heard of it. And if you are even dimly familiar with kung fu movies, you know that there are more adaptations of this than there are stars in the sky. There are no fewer than, I think at last count, something like 18 adaptations of this for a combination of cinema and TV. It is ridiculous how many adaptations there have been of this. There are good reasons for that. It's pretty good. It's fairly foundational. As you're listening to this, going through your head will be basically, if you've ever watched a kung fu movie from like the 70s or 80s before, um, barring, particularly anything that was kind of, oh, flighty ancient China, um, the sound effects are going to be going through your head. So as we do this, let the sounds of some Foley guy beating the bejesus out of a Naugahyde sofa with a with a baseball bat resound forth in your mind's ear. Um, so, some disclaimers: Chinese dialects of any stripe are not, repeat, not my bailiwick. So I'm going to be faking it for most of these names and places. I'm sorry. I'm not proud of it. If you know how to better pronounce these, please, please, please do not hesitate to either type something in chat or in the comments, because I don't know, and expanding my knowledge base helps. Um, Second, there are and I mentioned this, both of these in the stream description. There are a lot of characters. I am going to get them confused. I do not expect you to keep them all straight. Mostly it's going to make sense based on context. Um, Also, the book is fairly repetitious when it comes to character introductions, um, particularly when we get to the subsequent volumes, volume 2, 3, and 4. They're going to be pretty good about at least saying something like, oh, this person did X or Y. Um, if they're still around. There was some other one, some other thing I wanted to comment on, and I don't remember what it was. I suppose I could find trivia. I'm not going to do that right now, though. So for the next couple months, month or two, I am not. Oh, geez, I forgot there are footnotes. Oh, wait, no, those are just text notes. There are not proper footnotes. Okay, we're good. I don't have to worry about interrupting myself all the time. There is an appendix in the back that has a bunch of useful information, such as an explanation of what a wolf fang club is. On page 2, Wolf Fang Club, a weapon that consists of a long wooden pole of varying lengths with one end covered in sharp spikes, reminiscent of the 16th century English weapon known as the holy water sprinkler. The other end can be fitted with an additional point. So there's a bunch of these. I will consider whether to check on them. Some of them actually have some pretty interesting um, cultural context things, tidbits in there. Because, and these are important because a lot of Chinese literature makes reference to certain things or assumes you know certain things, which, as a native Chinese person, you probably would already know, but as a non-native, you probably won't. And the book is all four of these translations all have these. I think all of them have notes on the text in the back in an appendix. So those are quite handy. So, with that, oh, I guess there's one additional detail that you don't need to know, but I'll mention anyway. There are some pretty neat little illustrations sprinkled sparsely throughout the book. I cannot easily share those with you. Um, I have not been able to find them elsewhere, but I haven't used the full extent of my Google Fu prowess. So it may be possible that I'll be able to find some of them. I don't think there are any in the section that we're going to read. We're not going to get very far today. My time is somewhat limited. There is, in fact, one. Suffice it to say, if you want some decent mental imagery, uh, search on whatever your favorite browsing engine is and find you a copy of either the book or of any of the movies that deal with the first section, of which there are several. And that is way too far. And keep things in your mind, I guess. Where is this chapter break? Okay, there it is. Oh, jeez, I am losing it today. I am so sorry. It has been a long 2 weeks. If there was any abundant evidence for this, it was Monday. Monday was not great. I am not overthrilled with what happened on Monday, but the less said about that, the better. I embarrassed myself thoroughly. Okay, so with that out of the way, I'm going to get cracking on Legends of the Condor Heroes, Book 1, A Hero Born by Jin Yong, pen name of Louis? Louis? Lewis, possibly, Cha. I'm gonna go with Lewis for now. It could be Louis. I have no idea. More Google Fu. Louis Cha. Jin Young. For what it's worth, Jin Yong did die not that long ago, back in I think 2018, which is too bad. But they were very influential, so they have left their mark. Um, where are you? How is Louis Cha pronounced? I want to know if it's Louis or Louis. It could be Louis. If anyone out there knows, please, 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 please say now. That doesn't tell me. We're going to go with Louis. It sounds fine. Anyway, that's his pen name anyway. We're mostly going to refer to him as Jin Yong. Jin Yong? I don't know how that's pronounced either. But again, we're faking it. So, again, apologies for all the mispronunciations, egregious and otherwise, that I'm about to commit. Um, Hopefully I'll get lucky and get some of them right. Okay, let's get cracking. Legends of the Condor Heroes, Book 1, A Hero Born, by Jin Yong. Introduction. Dear reader, it begins with a storyteller, with news from the north, a tale of crushing defeat and humiliation, a great Chinese empire in tatters and fleeing south. It begins with a court corrupt to the core, willing to sacrifice the Chinese people to the invading Jurchen tribes for the chance of gold and escape. It begins with two patriots, two farmers self-taught in the martial arts, and one Taoist priest, determined to avenge their deaths. It begins with two sons, still in their mothers' bellies, when their fathers are slain, divided and taken into enemy hands, brought up far away from their Chinese motherland. This is the start of an explosive epic of courage, honor, and justice by one of the world's best-loved writers. You are about to begin a journey that will span the lengths of the Chinese Empire and beyond, traverse centuries, and witness dynasties rise and fall in brutal wars and deceitful invasions. Brave men fight and die for their homeland, and traitors exchange honor for personal gain. You will meet young men and women with remarkable kung fu skills, and you will encounter gruff men who, despite appearances, always respect the code of honor that governs the martial arts world. You will be amazed by semi-celestial animals, magic medicinal concoctions, and poison-tipped weapons. You will come face to face with princes who manipulate and mothers who are easily manipulated, men whose love is undying and women whose hearts never err. Jin Yong was the pen name of Louis Cha, born in Zhejiang province in China in 1924. As Jin Yong, his fictional universe has captured the imagination of generations of Chinese readers ever since his first novel appeared in serialized form in the Hong Kong newspaper New Evening Post in 1955. He went on to write 14 novels, most of which are in fact the length of several novels by modern publishing standards, and one final short story. These epics, of which Legends of the Condor Heroes is considered one of his best, quickly cemented Jin Yong's reputation as a master of the Wuxia genre, which can be roughly translated as martial heroes literature. The genre has its antecedents in some of the earliest vernacular writing found in Chinese. This is not included, but see Exhibit A, um, Journey to the West, or anything to do with Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, which is extremely old. The origins of that are very old. That is, hundreds of years now, I think. Although disparaged by some early commentators, elements now considered fundamental to this literature have been argued to be present in great works of serious literature, such as Sima Qian's Records of the Grand Historian, Shiji. Wuxia fiction's counterculture credentials have, however, always formed a large part of its appeal. While there are features that feel familiar to us from Western chivalric literature, the martial arts fighters who populate Jin Yong's books are often lone figures from the lowest levels of society, rather than members of court, who burn with a strong sense of justice and righteousness, or sometimes mere ego and greed. Unashamedly entertaining, even to this day some have wished to write martial arts fiction off as merely the stuff of pulp, but with Jin Yong's writing came a serious challenge. Born into a wealthy landowning family, later stripped of their wealth under Maoism, Louis Cha attended law school before turning to journalism after moving to Hong Kong. Yet this was merely the start of a life of learning, which saw him gain 2 PhDs in his 80s, one on Tang Dynasty history at Cambridge University, and one in Chinese literature at Peking University. The depth of his knowledge of Chinese history and the classics of Chinese writing are evident everywhere in his novels. Furthermore, his body of writing has given rise to an area of academic study all of its own, known as Jinology. Remarkably, you hold in your hands the first edition of Legends of the Condor Heroes to ever have been published in English in the United States. Considering that he has sold in the hundreds of millions and his reputation extends over most of East Asia, it is astonishing that it has taken 60 years to get here. Why, may you ask? Many have considered Jin Yong's world too foreign, too Chinese for an English-speaking readership. Impossible to translate. The fact that it hadn't been done was proof that it could never be done. I first came across Jin Yong in my first term of reading modern Chinese studies at Oxford University. I was still stuck in the rudimentaries, shakily tracing my first characters and trying to sound out the correct tones of ni hao, hello. Even then, without a hope of being able to read them, Chinese friends were telling me about their favorite author. "You must read his books. I've loved them since I was a child," I kept hearing. It was to take me another 3 years of intensive study to even dare to open one and try. And, instantly, I was hooked. With a dictionary by my side, I started to wander great emotional landscapes of love, loyalty, honor, and the power of the individual against successive corrupt governments and invading forces. It was to be some years later, however, that I would actually try to translate Jin Yong's writing. I had published a few translations of contemporary Chinese novels already, and was starting out on my career as an agent representing Chinese writers when I got the chance to try pitching and translating Legends of the Condor Heroes. I was convinced that it would work in English, that people would fall in love with these stories the way Jin Yong's readers had in China, if only they got the chance. The supposed untranslatability of it seemed strange to me, as the fundamental emotional worlds of these characters felt as universal as any story could hope for. Could hope to be, sorry. And yet, my first attempt was a disappointment, dry and flat. The action felt dead on the page. I was beginning to understand why it was considered difficult. After months of work, edits, and feedback from the agent I was working with, we had a draft that was ready to be shown to editors. And the reaction was instant. 6 publishers were keen, but one of the UK's most eminent editors was determined to have it for his list. Before I knew it, I was embarking on a full-length translation. It was, and as I continue through the series, continues to be, a life-defining challenge to translate these books. Jin Yong's status, his many, many, many adoring fans, and their expectations have worn heavy on my shoulders. But my greatest debt lies to you, the English reader, those of you who cannot pick up an original copy and discover Jin Yong on his terms alone. Perhaps this is always the hardest part of being a translator. To me, the most important thing is to try to recreate the feeling of reading Jin Yong in Chinese, the pace, the excitement, the emotional highs and lows. There will be words and concepts unfamiliar, quotations from ancient verse and philosophical texts, alongside amusing set pieces and great humor. These are the things that make Jin Yong a master, my Shifu, if I may presume to call him such, because he can combine the profound and the comical like no other. In 2018, we lost Louis Cha. But we will always have Jin Yong, and his legacy lives on now in ever more languages around the world. So, dear reader, all that is left is to enter through these pages into a universe at once fantastical and based on real historical events, one both foreign and intimately familiar, a story full of heart and of remarkable physical prowess. Anna Holmwood, translator. Um, Actually, looking ahead at this character list, there's a bunch of spoilers in here. I knew that, but I didn't realize how early the spoilers started. You know what? We'll do it anyway. Characters, as they appear in this, the first volume of Legends of the Condor Heroes, A Hero Born. Let me scooch my streaming software over so I can actually see it. Somebody tries talking to me. Hi. I'm not seeing it. Oh, there we go. It wasn't moving. That's a bad sign. All right. So, main characters. Guo Jing, son of Sky Fury Guo and Lily Li. After his father's death before he was born, he grows up with his mother in Mongolia, where they are looked after by the future Genghis Khan. Yang Kang, son of Ironheart Yang and Charity Bao, sworn as brother to Guo Jing while both are still in their mother's bellies. Lotus Huang is highly skilled in kung fu, but she refuses to reveal the identity of her master when challenged. More on her in book 2, by the way. The Song Patriots, as in the dynasty. Ironheart Yang, descendant of Triumph Yang, one-time rebel turned patriot who served under General Yue Fei. Ironheart practices the Yang family spear, a technique passed from father to son. Married to Charity Bao, daughter of a country scholar from Red Plum Village. Sky Fury Guo, sworn brother to Ironheart Yang, he is descended from Prosperity Guo, one of the heroes of the marshes of Mount Liang. Sky Fury fights with the double halberd, in keeping with the Guo family tradition. Married to Lily Li, Guo Jing's mother. She escapes the attack on Ox Village and ends up in Mongolia with Guo Jing. Kusan, Chusan, owner of Ox Village's only tavern. He keeps his kung fu skills secret from the rest of the villagers. Mu Yi travels all across the Song and Jin-controlled lands with his daughter, Mercy Mu, organizing a martial contest in order to find her a suitable husband. Song Imperial Traitors. Justice Duan, an army officer to the song who, in actual fact, is a ringing phone. Sorry about that. Where were we? Ah, yes, Song Imperial Traitors. Justice Duan, an army officer to the Song who, in actual fact, works for the Jin. Wang Daoqian, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, Daoqian. A military official in the Song court, he is killed by Chu Chuji for accepting bribes by the Jin. The Five Greats. Considered the five greatest martial artists after a contest was held on Mount Hua. Only two are mentioned in this first book in the series. The Eastern heretic apothecary Huang, a loner and radical who practices his unorthodox martial arts on Peach Blossom Island, along with his wife and 6 students. He holds traditions and their accompanying morals in contempt, and believes only in true love and honor. His eccentricity and heretical views make others suspicious of him, an image he himself cultivates. And Double Sun Wang Chongyang, founder of the Chuanzhen sect in the Zhongnan Mountains, with the aim of training Taoists in the martial arts so that they might defend the Song against the Jurchen invasion. A real historical figure, he lived from AD 1113 to 1170. Sorry. I know how to read. It's okay. Numbers are hard. The Chuanzhen Taoist sect, a real branch of Taoism, whose name means way of complete perfection. The Seven Immortals, students of Wang Chongyang. Only 3 of the immortals make their appearance in this first book of the series. Scarlet Sun Ma Yu, the oldest of the immortals, teaches internal kung fu based on breathing techniques. Eternal Spring Chu Chuji befriends Ironheart Yang and Sky Fury Guo at the beginning of the series and vows to protect their unborn offspring. To this end, he devises a martial contest with the 7 freaks of the South. He becomes teacher to Yang Kang. Jade Sun Wang Chuyi, the Iron Foot Immortal, befriends Guo Jing after hearing of Chu Chuji's contest with the 7 freaks of the South. Harmony Yin, apprentice to Chu Chuji. The 7 Freaks of the South, also known as the 7 Heroes of the South when being addressed respectfully by other characters. They refer to themselves as a martial family despite being of no blood relation. K. Zhen-E, suppressor of evil, also known as Flying Bat. The oldest of the freaks, he is often referred to as Big Brother. Blinded in a fight, his preferred weapon is his flying devil nuts, iron projectiles made in the shape of a kind of water chestnut native to China. Quick Hands Zhu Kong the Intelligent is known for his quick thinking and even quicker sleight of hand. His dirty scholar's dress and broken oil paper fan, really made from iron, belie his real martial skill. He is particularly knowledgeable in acupressure points, using them to disable his opponents in a fight. At times, he might also use his skills to steal gold and other items, but only from those he thinks dishonorable and thus deserving of such trickery. Rider Han, protector of the steeds, only 3 feet in height, but a formidable fighter when sitting astride a horse. Woodcutter Nan the Merciful, known for his kind, if not shy, nature, teaches Guojing saber technique. He fights with an iron-tipped shoulder pole. Zhang Asheng, also known as the Laughing Buddha, is a burly man dressed as a butcher, whose preferred weapon is a butcher's knife. He is secretly in love with Jade Han. Gildan Chuan the Prosperous, cloaked master. Where's that Quan? It's Quan. And I'm trying to remember my rules of Chinese pronunciation in English. I'm coming up short on how Qu is pronounced. I'm going to go with Quan for now. Gildan Quan the Prosperous, cloaked master of the market, is a master of the rules of the marketplace and always looking for a good deal. He fights with a set of scales. Jade Han, maiden of the Yue sword, is the youngest and only female of the group. She is trained in the Yue sword, a technique particular to the region surrounding Jiajing, and developed when the kingdom of Yue was at war with the kingdom of Wu in the 5th century BC. So kinda old. The Mongolians. The great Khan Temujin, one of the great warlords who will go on to unite the various Mongolian tribes and assume the name Genghis Khan. Temujin's children. Jochi, Temujin's eldest son, Chagatai, the second son, Ogadai, the third son, Tolui, the fourth son and Guojing's sworn brother, Kojin, one of the many daughters whose names are mostly lost to history. Temujin betroths her first to Tusaka, son of the rival Sengum, and then to Guojing. Temujin's allies and followers. Jamuka, Temujin's sworn brother and ally. Jebe, whose name means arrow and divine archer in Mongolian, is made a commander of Temujin's men after demonstrating his great skill with a bow and arrow, and showing himself to be a loyal fighter of considerable principle. Temujin's 4 great generals, Mukali, Borgurchi, Borokul, and Chilaun. Temujin's rivals. Ong Khan, sworn brother of Temujin's father, Sengum, son of Ong Khan, and Tusaka, son of Sengum, but is only a few years older than Guojing and bullies him and Tolui when they are young. The Jin Empire. Wanyan Honglie, 6th prince, titled Prince of Zhao, has made conquering the Song his own personal mission, in order to secure his reputation and legacy among his own people. He is an astute tactician, using rivalries and jealousies within the Song court and the Wulin to his own advantage. Wanyan Hongshi, 3rd prince, lacks his younger brother's political sense, especially when dealing with the Mongols. Wanyan Kang, son of the 6th prince Wanyan Honglie, is arrogant and entitled, but possesses considerable martial skill. He fights Guojing after refusing to marry Mercy Mu, consort to the 6th prince, mother of Wanyan Kang. Followers of the 6th prince of Wanyan Honglie. I swear we're going to be getting to the actual story in about a page and a half. It's a long bit, but this is important reference material, and it sort of girds your loins for what we're in for, which is a lot. It's excellent, but it's a lot. Followers of the 6th prince Wanyan Honglie. Gallant Ouyang, master of the White Camel Mount in the Kunlun Range, nephew to one of the 5 greats, Viper Ouyang, Venom of the West. The Dragon King Hector Shah controls the Yellow River with his 4 rather more useless apprentices, whose lack of skill infuriates their master, despite the fact that it is most likely his foul temper that has prevented them from learning anything more than their rather basic moves. The 4 demons of the Yellow River. Shen Qinggang the Strong, whose weapon is a saber called the Spirit Cleaver. Wu Qinglie, the Bold, fights with a spear called the Dispatcher. Ma Qingzhong, the Valiant, is known for his Soul Snatcher whip. And Qian Qingjian, the Hardy, is armed with a pair of axes known as the Great Reapers. Browbeater Ho, the three-horned dragon, so named for the three cysts on his forehead. Greybeard Liang, also known as Old Liang, the Ginseng Immortal, and, more disparagingly, the Ginseng Codger. He comes from the Mountain of Eternal Snow, Changbai Mountain, up in the northeast, close to the current border with Korea, where he has practiced kung fu for many years as a hermit, as well as mixing special medicinal concoctions with the aim of prolonging life and gaining strength. Lama Supreme Wisdom Lobsang Choden Rinpoche from Kokonor, now known as Qinghai. He is famed for his five-finger blade kung fu. Tiger Peng, the outlaw, butcher of 1,000 heads, has command of much of the mountainous region surrounding the Jin capital, Yanjing, which would later become Peking. Peach Blossom Island. Twice Foul Dark Wind were apprentices of apothecary Huang, who fled Peach Blossom Island and eloped after stealing the 9-yin manual. Husband Hurricane Chen, known as Copper Corpse, and wife Cyclone May, known as Iron Corpse, are masters of 9-yin skeleton claw. They killed Ke Zhen'e's brother, Ke Bixie, the talisman. And finally, the Immortal Cloud Sect. Abbot Withered Wood of Cloudy Perch Temple is uncle to Justice Duan. He hates his treacherous nephew, but is tricked into enlisting the help of Scorched Wood and the 7 Freaks of the South to fight against Chu Chuji. Reverend Scorched Wood of Fahua Temple is a fellow disciple of Withered Wood's martial master. And with that, introductions are over, and the adventure can begin. Chapter 1. Suddenly a Snowstorm. 1. The Chantang River stretches from the west, where its waters swell day and night, past the new imperial capital of Linan and the nearby Ox village, on to the sea in the east. 10 cypresses stand proudly along its banks, their leaves red like fire. Wait, aren't cypresses a coniferous tree? Don't they have needles, not leaves? What am I thinking of? Sorry. 10 cypresses stand proudly along its banks, their leaves red like fire. A typical August day. The grasses are turning yellow beneath the trees, and the setting sun is breaking through their branches, casting long, bleak shadows. Under the shelter of 2 giant pine trees, men, women, and children have gathered to listen to a traveling storyteller. The man is around 50, a pinched figure in robes once black, now faded a blue-gray. He begins by slapping 2 pieces of pear wood together, and then, using a bamboo stick, he beats a steady rhythm on a small leather drum. He sings, "Untended, the peach blossoms still open, as misty fallow fields draw the crows. In times past, by the village well, families once gathered to vent their sorrows." The old man strikes the pieces of wood together a few more times and starts his story. This poem tells of villages where ordinary people once lived, raised by Jurchen tribes and turned to rubble. That's R-A-Z-E-D, not R-A-I-S-E-D. They sound the same. They're very different. Raised by Jurchen tribes and turned to rubble. One such story concerns Old Man Ye, who had a wife, a son, and a daughter, but they were separated from one another by the invasion of the Jinn. Years passed before they were reunited and could return to their village. After making the perilous journey back to Weizhou, they arrived to discover their home had been burned to the ground by enemy forces, and they had no choice but to make for the old capital at Kaifeng. He sings. The heavens unleash unexpected storms. People suffer unforeseen misfortune. Upon arrival, he continues, they encountered a troop of Jin soldiers. Their commanding officer spotted the young Miss Ye, by now a beautiful young maiden, and eager to capture such a glorious prize, he jumped down from his horse and seized her. Laughing, he threw her onto his saddle and cried, Pretty girl, you are coming home with me. What could the young Miss Ye do? She struggled with all her might to free herself from the officer's grip. If you continue to resist, I will have your family killed, the man shouted. With that, he picked up his wolf-fang club and smashed it down on her brother's head. The netherworld gains a ghost, just as the mortal world loses one more soul. He breaks again into song. Old Man Ye and his wife threw themselves on top of their son's body, weeping and sobbing. The commanding officer raised his wolf-fang club and once again brought it down on the mother, and then once more on the father. Rather than cry or plead, the young Miss Ye turned to the soldier and said, Sir, rest your weapon. I will go with you. The soldier was delighted to have persuaded her, but just as he let down his guard, the young Miss Ye grabbed the saber from his waist, unsheathed it, and held the point of the blade to his chest. Was she about to avenge her family's death? Alas, it was not to be. Being experienced on the battlefield, the soldier knew that if he took a deep breath, tensed his muscles, and pushed against the blade, she would tumble to the ground. Then he spat in her face. Whore! But young Miss Ye brought the blade to her neck. That poor, innocent girl. A beauty made of flower and moon, and so was taken the sweetest soul that night. He alternates between singing and speaking, all the while beating his small drum with the bamboo stick. The crowd is entranced by the old man's words. They snarl with rage at the soldier's cruelty, and sigh at the young girl's sacrifice. Dear friends, as the saying goes, keep honest heart and ever God's in mind. For if evil deeds go unpunished, only evil doth one find. The Jinn have conquered half our territories, killing and burning. There is not an evil deed they have not committed. And yet no punishment is forthcoming. The officials of our great empire are responsible for this. China has plenty of men, healthy and willing to fight, yet every time our army faces the Jinn, they turn and run, leaving us peasants behind to suffer. There are stories, a great many stories, just like this one north of the Yangtze. The South is a paradise in comparison, but still you live each day in fear of invasion. Rather be a dog in times of peace than a man in times of trouble. My name is Old Zhang. Thank you for listening to the true story of young Miss Ye. The storyteller bangs together the two pieces of pear wood and holds out a plate to the crowd. Villagers shuffle forward and drop a few coins onto it. Old Zhang puts the coins into a pocket and starts gathering his belongings. As the crowd disperses, a young man of about 20 pushes his way up to the storyteller. Sir, did you just come from the north? He is short but strong, with two hairy caterpillar eyebrows stretched across his brow. He is from the north. It can be heard in his accent. Yes, the old storyteller answers, surveying him. Then may I buy you a drink? I dare not receive such favor from a stranger, comes the old man's reply. After a few drinks we will no longer be strangers. The young man smiles. My name is Sky Fury Guo, he says, before pointing to a handsome, smooth-faced man behind him. And this is Ironheart Yang. We were listening to your story and we enjoyed it very much, but we would like to talk with you, ask you some questions. You bring news from home. Not a problem, young man. Fate has brought us together today. Sky Fury Guo leads the storyteller to the village's only tavern, and there they sit down. Chu San, the owner, hobbles to their table, on crutches, and sets down 2 jugs of warmed rice wine, before returning to fetch snacks of broad beans, salted peanuts, dried tofu, and 3 salted eggs. Afterward he sits down on a stool by the door and gazes out as the sun dips lower toward the horizon. Out in the yard his young daughter is chasing chickens. As a quick aside, I love the little excessive over details that Jin Young puts in this. Things like that last sentence or 2 sentence couplet about sitting on a stool by the door, gazing out as the sun dips lower toward the horizon, and then out in the yard his young daughter is chasing chickens, could have been completely excluded, but it gives you this perfect color and sets the tone and mood of the scene so well. I appreciate things like this sometimes. With that, you know, it's evening, and it's going to be pretty with a sunset. Sky Fury Guo toasts the storyteller and pushes the simple snacks toward him. Here, please eat. Out in the countryside, we are only able to buy meat on the 2nd and 16th days of the month, so I'm afraid we have none tonight. Please forgive us. The wine is enough for me. From your accents, it seems that you are both from the north. We are from Shandong province, Yang replies. We came here 3 years ago after the Jin invaded our hometown. We fell in love with the simple life in the south, as well as the people, and stayed. You said before that the south is a paradise, with only fear of invasion to disturb the peace. Do you really think the Jin will cross the Yangtze? The old storyteller sighs. It is as if gold and silver covers the ground. Everywhere your eyes are met with beautiful women. Such is the richness and enchantment of the South compared to the North. There isn't a day that passes that the Jin do not think about invading. But the final decision lies not with the Jin, but with the Song Imperial Court in Linan. This surprises Sky Fury Guo and Ironheart Yang. Why do you say that? We Han Chinese outnumber the Jurchen by more than 100 to 1. If the imperial court decided to employ honest and loyal men, our great empire would prevail. With 100 of our men against one of their worthless soldiers, how could the Jin army win? The northern half of our country was handed to them by 3 generations of useless emperors, Huizong, Qinzong, and Gaozong. Grandfather to grandson, they all entrusted our country to corrupt officials who oppressed the common people and purged all the mighty generals who wished to fight the Jin. Such a beautiful land, and they gave it away. If the imperial court continues to fill its grand halls with corrupt officials, then they may as well kneel before the Jin and beg them to invade. Exactly! Sky Fury Guo slams his hand down on the table, rattling the bowls, plates, and chopsticks. Ironheart Yang notices their jug of wine is empty, and orders another. The 3 men continue cursing and drinking as Kusan goes to fetch them yet more broad beans and tofu. Huh, Kusan snorts, placing the dishes on the table. What is it, Kusan? You disagree? Good cursing. Great cursing. Nothing wrong with that. But do you suppose it would have made any difference if the officials had not been corrupt? With such useless emperors, generations of them no less, it would have made no difference if the officials had been honest and good-hearted as the Buddha himself. He turns and shuffles to his stool in the corner, from where he goes back to gazing at a sky now filled with stars. Kusan has a young face for his 40 years, but his back is hunched and wisps of white are threaded through his black hair. From behind he looks like an old man, much aged since losing his wife. He moved to Ox Village only a year or so ago with his daughter, fleeing painful memories. The three men look at each other in silence, until presently the storyteller speaks. Yes, you are right. That is quite true. Bang! Sky Fury Guo slams his hand down on the table once again, this time knocking over a bowl of wine. Shameful! Disgraceful! How did these sorry excuses for men ever become emperor? Xiaozhang succeeded Gaozong, the storyteller replies with renewed energy, and Guangzhong succeeded him, and all the while the Jin have controlled half of China. Now Emperor Ningzhong has succeeded Guangzhong. All he does is take orders from Chancellor Han. What is our future? It's hard to say. What do you mean? Cries Sky Fury Guo. We are in the countryside, not Linan. We are in the countryside, not Linan. No one is going to cut off your head here. Sorry, no one is going to cut your head off here. There is not a person in the whole of China who does not call Chancellor Han a crook. Now that the topic has moved on to current politics, the old storyteller is beginning to feel nervous and dares not speak straight from the heart as before. He downs another bowl of rice wine and says, Thank you, gentlemen, for the wine. But before I go, may I offer a modest word of advice? I know you are both passionate men, but still it is best to be cautious in both word and deed. This is the only way to avoid calamity. With things as they are, the best we normal folk can hope to do is muddle along. It is just like the old song. Surrounded by mountains, dancing in halls, the shores of West Lake echo in song. Southern fragrances entice and intoxicate, as drunkenly our noblemen mistake Linan for Kaifeng. It doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. Ooh, that rhymed. What's the story behind that song? Yang asks. There is no story, the old man says, pushing himself to his feet with great effort. The officials care only for parties and pleasures, and as long as that is the case, they won't be trying to recover the North any time soon. And so the drunken storyteller takes his leave. 2. It was during the third watch later that night. Sky Fury Guo and Ironheart Yang had been waiting for more than 2 hours to spear a boar or a muntjac in the woods 7 li west of the village. But it was looking increasingly unlikely that they would catch anything, and they were losing patience. Li, there is a definition for that. That's page 7. And I forget how far a li is. This does not say. This does not say how far a li is. I don't remember. I have seen how far a li is, but I don't remember what it is. It's a fair distance, as I recall. Like a couple kilometers. Anyway, moving on. It was looking increasingly unlikely that they would catch anything and were losing patience. At that moment a loud smack of wood against metal echoed around the woodland from beyond the tree line. Sky Fury and Ironheart looked at each other. Then came the sound of men shouting. Where do you think you're going? Stop now! A shadow had entered the woods and was running in their direction. The moonlight caught a man's robes, and Guo and Yang were able to make him out. It was Kusan. He was jabbing his wooden crutches into the undergrowth. Knowing that he would struggle to outrun the men following him, Kusan flew straight up into the air and back down behind a nearby tree. Guo and Yang looked at each other in astonishment. Kusan practices martial arts? By now, Kusan's pursuers had reached the edge of the woods. There were 3 of them, and they stopped, whispered something to each other, and began to walk toward Guo and Yang. They were dressed in military clothing, and each carried a saber, their blades flashing a cold green in the moonlight. "Damn cripple, we can see you! Come out and surrender!" Kusan stood utterly still behind his tree. The men were waving their weapons like machetes, swinging and chopping through the straggly bushes, slowly edging closer. Just then, thump! Kusan thrust his right crutch out from behind the tree, hitting one of the men squarely in the chest and sending him lurching backward with a yelp. Startled, the other 2 men waved their blades in the direction of the tree. Using his right crutch for leverage, Kusan flew up to the left, dodging the flailing blades and thrusting his other crutch in one man's face. The man tried to block the crutch with his saber, but Kusan pulled back and swung the right crutch at the other man's stomach. Though he needed the crutches to support himself, he wielded them with speed and elegance. If you've watched any Hong Kong cinema ever, you know that wire trick shenanigans are happening. We've got wire stunts, ladies and gents. There will be a lot of them. A saber cut into Kusan's bundle, ripping the cloth and spilling its contents all over the forest floor. Taking advantage of the distraction, Kusan smashed his crutch down onto one man's head, knocking him to the ground. Terrified, the last soldier turned to run. Kusan reached between the folds in his robe, and with a sharp flick of his wrist, hurled something at him as he fled. It glinted an inky black as it sailed through the air, drawing a curve and landing on the back of the soldier's head with a dull thud. The man howled and dropped his saber, his arms waving wildly. He fell forward as if in slow motion, and landed in a crumpled heap on the ground. His body spasmed twice, and then he was still. Guo and Yang watched, their hearts thumping, hardly able to catch their breath.
"He just killed government officials. That's punishable by death," Guo gasped. "If he sees us, he'll kill us too, to keep us quiet."
But they had not hidden themselves as well as they had thought. Kusan turned toward them and called out, "Master Guo, Master Yang, you can come out now." Reluctantly, they rose to their feet, grasping their pitchforks so tightly their knuckles turned white. Yang looked at his friend and then took 2 steps forward. "Master Yang," Kusan said with a smile, "your family's spear technique is famous throughout our land, but in the absence of a spear, a pitchfork will have to do. Your best friend Guo, however, prefers to fight with a double halberd. The pitchfork doesn't fit his skills. Such friendship is rare." Yang felt exposed. Kusan had all but read his mind. "Master Guo," Kusan continued, "let's imagine you had your double halberd with you. Do you think together you could beat me?" Guo shook his head. "No, we couldn't. We must have been blind not to have noticed you were a fellow practitioner of the martial arts, a master even. I don't even have full use of my legs. How can I be considered a master?" Kusan shook his head and sighed. "Before my injury, I would have defeated those guards effortlessly." Guo and Yang glanced at each other, not sure how to respond. "Would you help me bury them?" Kusan continued. They looked at each other again and nodded. The 2 men did their best to dig a large hole using their pitchforks.
As they were burying the last body, Yang noticed the black, round object sticking out of the back of the dead man's head. Yang tugged at it and succeeded in pulling it out. He had seen one of these before, a steel Taoist 8-trigram disc. He wiped the blood onto the dead man's uniform and handed it back to Kusan. "My sincerest gratitude." Kusan took the 8-trigram disc and put it back inside his robe. He then spread his outer robe on the ground and started to gather his belongings. Guo and Yang finished shoveling soil into the makeshift grave.
Oh, sorry.
And then turned to look at Kusan's collection, which included 3 scrolls, as well as several shiny metal trinkets. Kusan put a gold jug and bowl to one side. After tying up his bundle, he handed the jug and bowl to the 2 men. "I stole these from the royal palace at Linan. The emperor has done enough harm to the peasants. It's not really a crime to take something back. Consider these a gift from me." Neither man moved. "Are you afraid to accept them, or is it that you don't want them?" "We did nothing to deserve such gifts," Guo replied. "That's why we can't accept them. As for tonight, you don't have to worry about a thing, Brother Ku. Your secret is safe with us." "Ha!" Kusan scoffed. "Why should I be worried? I know all about you. Why else would I let you walk away alive? Master Guo, you are the descendant of Prosperity Guo, one of the heroes of the marshes of Mount Liang. You are skilled in the use of the halberd, as taught to you in accordance with your family's customs, only your halberd is short rather than long, and has 2 blades instead of 1. Master Yang, your ancestor is Triumph Yang, one of the commanders who served under the beloved General Yue. You are both descended from 2 of this country's most beloved and respected patriots. When the Jin army conquered the north, you began wandering the lakes and rivers of the south, practicing your martial arts. It was then that you became brothers in arms. Together you moved here to Ox Village. Am I right so far?" The 2 men nodded, astounded by the detail of Kusan's knowledge. "Your ancestors Prosperity Guo and Triumph Yang were both rebels before they swapped sides to fight for the Song Empire," Kusan continued. "Both stole from the government, which was in turn stealing from its own people. So tell me, are you going to accept my gifts or not?" "We are most grateful, thank you," Yang said as he reached out to receive them. "Back home," Kusan said, slinging his bundle over his shoulder. "I got some excellent things tonight," he continued as the 3 men picked their way between the trees and out of the woods. "2 paintings by Emperor Huizong and a scroll of his calligraphy. He may have been a useless emperor, but his skills with the brush were quite superb." Once home, Guo and Yang buried their gold and made no mention of the night's antics to their wives. Autumn slowly gave way to winter. The days were getting colder, and the first flakes of snow were beginning to fall. Soon the earth was covered in a veneer of white that shone like polished jade. Ironheart Yang called to his wife. "I'm going to go get some food and rice, swine, before Sky Fury and his wife arrive." Slinging 2 large gourds over his shoulder, he left for Kusan's tavern. The snow was falling more heavily. As he trudged up toward the tavern, he noticed the door was shut tight, and even the sign had been removed. Yang banged on the door a couple of times, shouting, "Kusan, I'm here for some wine." Silence. He called out again, but still no response. He walked over to a window and peered inside. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust. "What's happened?" Yang thought. "I hope it's nothing serious." He spotted Kusan's daughter playing nearby, but she was too young to give him any answers. As Ku's Inn was the only place to buy wine in Ox Village, Yang had no choice but to brave the blizzard and walk the 2 miles to Red Plum Village. At least there he would also be able to purchase a chicken for their meal. When her husband returned, Yang's wife, Charity Bao, put the freshly slaughtered chicken into a big pot along with some cabbage, tofu, and thin bean noodles. As it boiled, she cut and arranged a plate of cured meat and fish, and then went next door to call on Sky Fury Guo and his wife, Lily Lee, who had been suffering of late from morning sickness. Lily did not feel able to eat, so Charity stayed to chat and drink tea, sending Guo ahead. The 2 women returned to discover the men sitting by the fire, eating and drinking warm wine. Charity added more wood, then sat down beside her husband. The 2 men looked agitated. "What's the matter?" Lily asked. "Has something happened?"
We were just discussing the latest troubles at the imperial court in Linan, her husband replied. I was at the Pavilion of Joyful Rain, the tea house by Tranquility Bridge, yesterday, Guo added, when I heard some people talking about that criminal Chancellor Han. One man said all reports at court must now be presented to him, as well as the emperor, or else they won't be read. Such arrogance is scarcely to be credited.
Yang sighed. "Only bad emperors keep bad chancellors. Old Huang, who lives outside Linan's Golden Gate, told me a story. One day, when he was out collecting firewood on the mountain, he caught sight of a group of soldiers guarding some officials. It turns out the chancellor had come up on a sightseeing trip with his men. Old Huang was minding his own business, cutting wood, when he heard the chancellor say, 'What a delightful country scene! Such charming bamboo fences and thatched cottages. Shame there are no chickens clucking or dogs barking.' Then, at that moment, they heard barking from behind one of the bushes."
Charity smiled.
"That little dog certainly knew how to please the chancellor." "I'll say. After a couple of barks it jumped out of the bushes. And what kind of dog do you think it was? Turns out it was our honorable friend, the magistrate of Linan, His Excellency Mr. Zhao."
Charity burst into laughter. "And that's how he'll earn his promotion," Guo concluded. They continued drinking as the snow fell outside, the wine warming their bellies. After a while, Guo and Yang decided to step outside to cool down. Suddenly, the stillness was broken by the sound of feet swishing across the snow. There, up ahead, was a Taoist monk wearing a conical bamboo hat tied under his chin with a ribbon, and a cape speckled with large flakes of snow. He carried a sword on his back, the yellow tassel swinging from side to side as it dangled from the handle. He was the only person braving the weather, a lonely silhouette making rapid progress across the gray-white fields. "Look at how he skims across the snow," breathed Guo in admiration. "A master of kung fu." "Indeed," Yang replied in equal amazement. "Let's invite him in for a drink." They hurried to the edge of the field in front of Yang's house. In the short time it had taken them to run the 100-odd meters, the monk had already passed by, and was some distance down the raised path that ran between the fields. "Your reverence, please stop!" Yang called out. The Taoist monk turned and gave them a cursory nod. "Such terrible weather!" Yang continued, shouting through the snow. "Why don't you come inside and drink a couple of bowls of wine to warm up?" Within seconds the Taoist was standing before them. "Why do you want me to stop?" His reply was as cold as the winter air. "Speak!" Yang was shocked and angered by the Taoist's tone, so he looked down at his feet and gave no reply. Guo clasped his fist as a sign of respect and said, "We were drinking by the fire when we saw you pass by alone in the snow, so we thought you might like to join us. Please forgive us if we have offended you." The Taoist rolled his eyes. "All right, if you want to drink, let's drink," he said, walking past them and in through Yang's door. This made Yang even angrier. Without thinking, he grabbed the Taoist's left wrist and tugged. "We don't know how to address you, your reverence." But the Taoist's hand slipped through Yang's fingers like a fish. Yang knew he was in trouble and stepped back, but before he could pull away, he felt he felt a sharp, hot pain as the Taoist tightened his grip around his wrist. No matter how hard he struggled, he could not free himself, and he felt all his strength draining away as his arm went limp. Guo could see from his friend's face. Wow. Guo could see from his friend's crimson cheeks that he was in a lot of pain. "Your reverence," he said, "please sit." The Taoist laughed coldly. He let go of Yang, walked deliberately into the center of the room, and sat down in one smooth movement. "You two young men are obviously from the north, but pretending to be farmers here in the south. Your accents gave you away. And what's more, why would two farmers know kung fu?" He, too, spoke with a Shandong accent. Whatever that is. Sorry, I haven't sorted that out in my head yet. I apologize. Yang felt embarrassed and angry, and retreated to the back room. There he found a small dagger in a drawer, which he tucked into his shirt before returning to the front room. He poured out 3 bowls of wine, raised his as a toast, and downed its contents without a word. The Taoist looked past the 2 men, and out toward the snow falling outside. He neither drank nor spoke. Guo guessed that the monk was suspicious of the wine, so he took the bowl intended for their guest and drank it down in one gulp. "The wine gets cold quickly. Let me pour you another bowl, your reverence, a warm one." He filled a clean bowl and handed it to the Taoist, who in turn drank it down in one. "It wouldn't have mattered if you had drugged the wine," the Taoist replied. "It wouldn't have affected me." Yang had had about as much as he could make, as he could. I don't know what's going on today. I'm so sorry. I'm ever so slightly furious with myself. Yang had had about as much as he could take. "We invited you into our home to drink with us, not to try and hurt you. If this is how you are going to behave, please leave now. It is not as if we gave you sour wine or rotten food." The Taoist ignored him and grabbed the wine gourd. He poured and drank 3 more bowls of wine in quick succession, and then untied his bamboo hat and threw it on the floor, along with his cape. For the first time, Guo and Yang could properly examine his face. He was around 30 years of age, with slanted eyebrows and a square jaw, his cheeks flushed red. His eyes had a penetrating quality. Next, he untied the leather bundle from his back and threw it down on the table. Together, Guo and Yang jumped up in disgust as from out of the bundle rolled a bloody human head. A scream came from the corner where Charity had been standing, and she ran into the back room, followed by Lily Lee. Yang's hand moved to his chest to make sure the dagger was in place. The Taoist gave the leather bundle a shake, and 2 more bloody lumps of flesh fell out, a heart and a liver. "You good-for-nothing Taoist!" Yang shouted as he pulled the dagger from his chest and lunged at the monk. The Taoist was amused. "You want to fight?" He tapped Yang's wrist with his left hand. A numbing pain shot down through Yang's hands to his fingers. A numbing pain shot down through Yang's hands to his fingers. Before he realized what was happening, the dagger was gone. Guo was astounded. His friend's kung fu was much better than his own, but even Yang was powerless against the monk. Guo knew the move was the legendary bare hand seizes blade. That's B-A-R-E, not B-E-A-R. Bare hand seizes blade, but as he had never actually seen anyone perform it.
but he had never actually seen anyone perform it. Guo reached for the wooden bench he had been sitting on, just in case he had to block the dagger. But still the Taoist ignored them. Instead, he turned his attention to the heart and liver, which he began hacking to pieces with Yang's dagger. Then, without warning, he roared. The tiles on the roof rattled, and he chopped down so hard the objects on the table jumped and the table split in two. The head rolled onto the floor. Yang was furious. He reached for an iron spear in the corner and marched outside into the snow. Come, I'll give you a lesson in the art of the Yang family spear. A government lackey like you knows the Yang family spear? The Taoist smiled as he followed Yang outside. Guo ran back to his house to fetch his double halberds. By the time he got back, the Taoist was standing ready, his sleeves flapping in the wind. Unsheath your sword, Yang cried. I'll fight you traitors with my bare hands, was the Taoist's only reply. Without warning, Yang launched straight into Deadly Dragon Flies the Cave, his spear a smear of red as the tassel spun and the tip swirled toward the Taoist's chest. Impressive, the monk called as his upper body arched backward until it was almost horizontal. He then spun to the left and swung back up again. Once on his feet, his palm flipped upward and knocked the spear away from Yang's hands. Ironheart Yang had spent years practicing with his spear, ever since his father taught him his first moves as a young boy, a variant of the southern tradition. The northern tradition had been lost many years ago. His ancestor, Triumph Yang, led an army of 300 Song soldiers against 40,000 invading Jin at the Battle of Little Merchant Bridge, with his spear his only weapon. They killed over 2,000 Jin men that day, including their highest-ranking commander. The Jin's arrows had fallen like rain, but Triumph Yang merely snapped the shafts from the arrowheads lodged in his flesh and carried on fighting. He gave his life for his country on that battlefield. When the Jin army burned his body, over 2 Jin of molten metal flowed into the mud beneath him. After this battle, the Yang family spear became famous all across China's Great Plains. That's metal as fuck. Pardon my French. I had forgotten that little detail lit. The guy gets so completely and thoroughly pincushioned with metal arrowheads, and then snaps off all the shafts, and then they burn his body, and whatever amount a gene is of molten metal comes out of the burning body because of all. Yeah, that's pretty impressive. There's going to be a lot of impressive stuff like that. Ironheart Yang may not have been a true master of the technique like his forefathers, but those years of training had not been in vain. He thrust, swung, flicked, blocked, the point of his spear glinting silver in the sunlight, the tassel a blur of red. Yang's moves may have been quick, but the Taoist dodged them with ease. The Yang family spear consisted of 72 separate moves, and after having used 71 without success, Yang was exhausted and desperate. He lowered his spear, turned, and walked away. But, just as he had anticipated, the Taoist came after him, and drawing together all the strength he had left, Yang pulled his weapon up into both hands, twisted at the waist, and thrust it back at the Taoist's face. Known as the returning horse, this move was traditionally used to break enemy formations. Triumph Yang had in fact used it to kill General Yue's brother before he left the rebels and joined the Song army. The Taoist clapped his hands together, clamping hold of the spear's point just before it plunged into his left cheek. Excellent! Yang put all his weight behind the spear and pushed, but it did not move. Alarmed, he tried pulling it back instead, but still he could not free his spear from the Taoist's grip. The Taoist chuckled. Suddenly he moved his right hand, and quick as light he struck the handle of the spear with his palm. Yang felt the base of his thumb and index finger go numb, and instantly the weapon fell to the snow at his feet. "You appear to know some Yang family spear, after all," the Taoist smiled. "Sorry if I offended you. Will you do me the honor of telling me your name?" Still in shock, Yang answered without thinking. "My family name is Yang, my given name Ironheart." "Are you a descendant of General Triumph Yang?" "Yes, he was my great-grandfather." The Taoist cupped his fist and nodded his head in respect. "I mistook you for scoundrels, but it turns out that you are descended from patriots. Please forgive me. May I be so bold as to ask this gentleman's name?" "My name is Sky Fury Guo." "He is my brother in arms," Yang said, "the descendant of Prosperity Guo, one of the heroes of the marshes of Mount Yang." The Taoist bowed again. "Your humble servant was rude, and quick to make assumptions. Please forgive me." Guo and Yang bowed in return. "Not at all. Would the Reverend please come in for more rice wine?" Yang said, picking up his spear. "Of course. I'd be delighted to join you." Charity and Lily Lee had been observing the fight anxiously from the doorway, and at this they scuttled back inside to warm the wine. They sat at the table, and the men asked the Taoist his name. "My name is Chu Chuji." Yang jumped up in surprise, and Guo was similarly aghast. "Master Eternal Spring?" "That is the name my Taoist friends gave me," Chu Chuji smiled. "I dare not claim such a name for myself." "Master Eternal Spring of the Quanzhen sect," Guo said. "I am honored to make your acquaintance." The two men cast themselves onto the packed earth floor of the cottage and kowtowed. Chu Chuji leapt up from his bench and helped them to their feet. "I killed a traitor today," he began to explain. "The government's men were chasing me, and then you gentlemen suddenly invited me in for a drink. We are close to the capital here, and it is clear that you are not ordinary farmers, so I became suspicious." "My friend here has always had a temper," Guo said with a smile. "And then he tried to fight the master. You were right to be suspicious." "Indeed. Farmers are not usually that strong. I thought you were undercover government dogs." Yang smiled. "You weren't to know. You weren't to know." There we go. That's a little better. Because this has such a large cast, you are going to hear repeat voices as I fake my way to fulfillment here. My apologies for that. Oh my goodness. Come on. Don't lose your Don't lose your place like this, Frag. Please don't. There we go. Much better. The men continued to drink and chat until Chu Chuji pointed at the battered head lying on the floor. "That's Wang Daochan. He was a traitor. Last year he was sent by our emperor to convey his respects to the Jin emperor on the occasion of his birthday, but once there he agreed to help them invade the south. I pursued him for 10 days before at last catching him." "We are so lucky to have met the master," Yang said. "Won't you stay a couple of days?" But just as Chu Chuji was about to answer, his expression froze and hardened. "What's wrong?" Guo asked. "Someone has come for me. Whatever happens, you two must stay inside. Do not come out under any circumstances. Do you understand?" The two men nodded. Chu Chuji picked up the human head and went outside, where he jumped up into the branches of a tree and hid among its dense crest of leaves. Guo and Yang had no idea what had just happened. They could hear nothing save for the howling of the wind. They waited until a few minutes later they could discern from the west a faint sound of hooves beating against frozen ground. "How did he hear that?" Yang asked in a whisper. The rhythmic thudding of the hooves was growing louder, and on the horizon a cloud of snow was making its way toward the village. Before long 10 riders dressed in black appeared and reined in 100 meters from their door.
The footsteps stop over there. It looks like there's just been a fight.
Several of the men jumped down from their horses and inspected the footprints in the snow.
Search the house.
Who appeared to be their
Search the house.
The man who appeared to be their officer barked. 2 more men jumped from their horses and hammered on the door. Suddenly something came flying through the air from a nearby tree, thwacking one of the men on the head with such force that it cracked open his skull. The other man started to yell as they surrounded the tree. One man picked up the object and cried out in shock,
"His Excellency Wang's head!"
Their commanding officer pulled out a saber, and the remaining men rushed to form a ring around the tree trunk. The leader shouted another order, and 5 men raised their bows and shot into the dense clump of leaves above them. Yang reached for his spear, but Guo grabbed at his arm and hissed, "Master Eternal Spring told us not to go outside. Let's wait a while at least. If he gets into trouble, we can help him then." Just then an arrow came hurtling from the branches above and hit one of the men still on his horse. He cried out, dropped from the horse's back, and landed in the snow with a dull thud. Chu-Chuji removed his sword, jumped down from the tree, and sliced through 2 of the men before the soldiers could react.
"It's the Taoist!"
Chu-Chuji bowed quickly, and then sha-sha-sha slashed his sword through the whipping wind, knocking another 2 men from their horses. Yang watched in awe, trying to follow the movement of the master's sword. Chu-Chuji had obviously held back during their duel. If he had not, Yang would be dead by now. Chu-Chuji moved as if he were being carried by the wind as he bounced and hopped between the horses, branches, and the ground. His next opponent was the commanding officer, who continued to bark orders at his men. He had a certain gift for fighting, but Guo and Yang could tell Chu-Chuji was deliberately prolonging the duel so as to use breaks in their fight to outmaneuver the other men. If he killed the leader before he managed to kill his men, they might run. By now there were only 6 men left. The officer knew that they could never defeat the Taoist, so he turned his horse and tried to escape. Chu-Chuji reached out with his left hand and grabbed the horse's tail. Pulling on it lightly, Chu-Chuji lifted himself from the ground. Before he had landed on the horse's back, he had already sliced his sword straight through the officer's back to the base of his spine. Chu-Chuji threw the body from the horse, grabbed hold of the reins, and started to chase the others, his blade dancing silver against the gray-white of the storm. Screams were swallowed by the wind as one body after another fell to the ground, and plumes of blood decorated the snow. Chu-Chuji stopped and looked around him. The only sound came from the 3 riderless horses galloping into the distance, their hooves pounding at the softly packed snow. He rode back to where Guo and Yang stood by the door, waved, and called, "How did you like that?" Guo and Yang opened the front door and stepped slowly out. "Your Reverence, who were they?" Guo asked, still in shock. "We'll know when we search them." Guo walked over to the commanding officer's body and leaned down to take a look. His torso was sliced in 2 and lay in a pond of blood. Guo reached for a leather pouch still fastened around the man's waist and removed an official-looking document. It was from Magistrate Zhao and stated that an order had come from the Jin ambassador that Song government troops were to assist them in capturing Wang Daochan's murderer. Guo's hands shook with rage as he rose to his feet. He was just about to show the document to the other 2 men when Yang called out. He had found some tags written in the Jurchen language on some of the bodies. There were Jin soldiers among these men.
"Our government has now given free rein to enemy soldiers to capture and kill patriots within our own borders?"
Guo exclaimed. Song officials now take orders from the Jin?
Even our emperor must refer to himself as an official of the Jin, Yang sighed. Our officials and generals are now no more than their slaves.
We monks are supposed to be merciful and good in heart and action. We are not supposed to harm any living being, Chu-Chuji added bitterly. But I could no longer withhold my anger, not when faced with traitors and enemies who do nothing but torture our people.
You were right to kill them, Yang said.
They deserve to die, Guo added. Fairly bloodthirsty, but, when you've been oppressed as long as these people apparently have. You will notice a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Paeans, Paeans, Pea, however that's spelled. Overtures to the relative value, worth, or lack thereof of corrupt government officials. Given that this was written when it was written, it's a kind of a sign of the times, as it were, in China, because this was what, 50s was originally published. 55, I think, was the date stated. Let's double check. 57. At least as a novel, it was 57. I think they said something about it was originally not syndicated, serialized in a magazine. That might have been in 55. Yeah. Well, his first novel was in 55. This was in 57. Anyway, yeah, sign of the times. Let's see here. Where were we? Ox Village was small, and in a snowstorm like this, everyone kept to their homes. If there had been any witnesses, it was doubtful they would come out and ask questions. Yang went to fetch 2 shovels and a hoe, and the 3 men buried the bodies. Lily Lee and Charity fetched brooms and began sweeping the blood-stained snow until the stench began to make Charity retch. A white mist descended in front of her eyes, and with a gasp she fell to her knees. Yang dropped his shovel and ran over to her.
What's the matter?
But Charity closed her eyes and did not answer. Her face and hands were now as white as the snow that fell upon them. Chu-Chuji hurried over, took hold of Charity's wrist, and felt her pulse. A smile burst across his face.
Congratulations!
Yang looked aghast as Chu-Chuji grabbed his hand.
What is it? What's happened?
Charity came to with a faint grunt. The three men were standing above her. Feeling shy, she scrambled to her feet, and with Lily's help went inside, where her friend poured her a cup of tea. Your wife is pregnant.
Are you sure?
I am a master of nothing and can claim to know a little of only 3 things. Of these little kung fu tricks I am a mere novice, and as for poetry, I am able to write a few couplets, but no more. But I can safely say that if I can lay claim to any expertise, it is in the field of medicine.
Your reverence, if yours are only little kung fu tricks, then we are merely children playing.
Having finished burying the bodies, the men collected their tools and went inside to celebrate. Yang could not stop smiling. If Chu-Chuji wrote poetry, he reasoned, he would be the perfect person to name his child, as well as Guo's.
My brother Sky Fury's wife is pregnant as well. Could we trouble your reverence to think of 2 names for our children?
Chu-Chuji sipped from his bowl of rice wine and thought for a while. For Master Guo's child, I suggest Guo Jing, meaning serenity, and for Master Yang's child, Yang Kang, meaning vitality. This will remind them of the humiliation of the year Jing Kang, when Kai Feng was sacked and the emperor captured by the Jin. These names can be used for girls just as well as boys. I'll take his word for it. He reached into his shirt, removed 2 daggers, and put them on the table. They were identical in every way, each with a green leather sheath, a gold crossguard, and an ebony handle. He picked up one of the daggers, and on the handle swiftly carved the characters for Serenity Guo, as if writing with brush and ink. Then he carved Vitality Yang on the handle of the other. He turned to the 2 fathers-to-be and said, "I don't have anything else suitable with me, only this pair of daggers. For the children." That's what I want given to children. Give 'em knives. It was a different time. Sorry, I'll try and keep the commentary to a minimum. I had someone ragging on me in YouTube comments. I may have thrown a bit too much snark back in his face. I don't know. Sorry, dude. You caught me at a bad time. I thought I kept it. I tried to keep it less sassy and fairly neutral, but I definitely may have let some sass and salt come forth. Listen, if you're gonna say that you don't like what I'm doing, that's fine. Get the actual thing. Get an actual audiobook. Spend money, please. Thank you. Support the author and the person doing the actual reading. Thanks. I'm doing this for free. You can complain. I'll take it to heart, but, I am going to tell you, if you want a better job done, either do it yourself or find a professional. There are professionals who have done these things. There's an entire career around that. Would I like that career? Probably. Oh, geez Louise. I lost my place entirely. I've been covering for that, and now I can't avoid it. This is the other problem with the asides and the rambling, is sometimes I'll get lost. I don't have anything else suitable with me, only this pair of daggers. For the children. The 2 men received them and thanked him. Yang unsheathed his. The blade was cold in his palm, and sharp. Just the thing for small infants to have. I came to possess these daggers quite by accident. They are extremely sharp, but they are too small for me to use. They would be perfect for the children. In 10 years' time, if I am lucky enough to be of this world, I will return to Ox Village and teach them some kung fu. The 2 men were delighted and thanked the Reverend repeatedly. Oh my gosh, who is saying that? Oh, it's Chuchuji. The Jin are occupying the north and torturing the people there. Chuchuji went on as he took his last gulps of rice wine. The situation cannot continue for long. Gentlemen, please take care of yourselves. Then he stood up and made for the door. Guo and Yang jumped to their feet and tried to make him stay, but he had already slipped out into the storm. Masters like him come and go like the wind, Guo sighed. We were lucky to meet him today. I was hoping to talk to him some more, but, alas, it was not to be. Yang smiled. Brother, at least we witnessed Master Eternal Spring killing Jin's soldiers. He held up the dagger and unsheathed it again. Gently stroking the blade, he suddenly looked up at his friend. Brother, now I've just had a foolish idea. Tell me what you think of it. What is it? If our children are boys, they will be sworn brothers. If they are girls, they will be sworn sisters. And if we have one boy and one girl, they shall be married, Guo cut in. The men laughed and embraced. At that moment, Lily Lee and Charity emerged from the back room. Why are you so happy? Why are you so happy? Why are you so happy? I'm not sure what I should do for emphasis on that one. Why are you so happy? Yang repeated their agreement, and they blushed, happy their families would forever be united. Let's swap the daggers now as our pledge, Yang suggested. If they turn out to be sworn brothers or sisters, we can switch back. If they are to be married... Then, apologies, but both daggers will belong to my family, Guo interrupted. Charity laughed. You never know. Maybe we will be the ones to have a boy. The men swapped daggers and gave them to their wives for safekeeping.
Sass and Salt, my new band.
I try not to get worked up by reading comments. I do promise I do read the comments on my videos when they are dropped on YouTube. I don't respond to all of them. Sorry, sadly, that would be a full-time job. But I do read them at least. I try to be constructive. I am not always. Sometimes I say shit that's just like, oh wow, I can't believe you typed that out and thought that was okay. Most of the time, I try not to. That time, I looked back on it and was like, maybe you got a little heated. But at the same time, it's like if you're going to comment 3 times on 3 separate videos, and it's like, okay, clearly this isn't for you. It's like, and you're going to be like, oh, I'm never listening to these ever again. I'm like, okay, cool, dude. Bye. you know, I think my exact words were, thanks for tuning in, exclamation point, toodles, period. I believe those were my exact words. Something along those lines, which is neutral-ish, but also could easily be perceived as the sarcastic slight that it probably was intended to be. Anyway, onward! Oh, man, I don't know what's going on with me tonight. I feel like it's Monday all over again. I slept really well last night. I don't understand what's going on. Just feel kind of bleary and beleaguered. It's probably this big honking weather front moving up along the east coast of the U.S. right now. That's probably it. Either that or I have a cold. I don't know. At any rate, you now are starting to get a picture of how human interactions and plot movement works in this. It's very early on, but you're going to begin to see recurring patterns. First introductions are often not necessarily a character behaving rationally or at their best. There will be something that turns character interactions around, and more to the point, uh, really dramatic events and sequences will happen, and then they move on very abruptly. It's like, oh yeah, there's like a bunch of dead bodies buried in our backyard right now. We just swept a bunch of blood-soaked snow into a hole in the ground, as well as some dead dudes. And yeah, happy scrappy time now. So it's the pacing in this series in general can be a little strange. Occasionally, at least, if you're accustomed to a certain kind of flow, but you get used to it. Still sometimes abrupt, not quite as abrupt as the average kung fu movie ending. There is nothing more abrupt than the average like Hong Kong cinema film ending. Those can be wild. Those can be like, okay, that was unnecessarily abrupt. They can be pretty abrupt. This is less so. This is less abrupt. There's a bit more uh, anticlimax, I should say. Okay, back to the reading. Chapter 3. No, sorry, just 3. There's no chapter 3. It's just 3. 3! Yang was slumped at the table, playing with the dagger, more drunk than he had realized. Charity helped her husband into bed and collected the dishes. The navy blue sky was dotted with stars, but there was still enough light. Sorry, let's try this sentence again. The navy blue sky was dotted with stars, but there was still enough light for... How am I getting lost in this sentence? It's not that much of a line break. I'm sorry. The navy blue sky was dotted with stars, but there was still enough light for her to go outside and collect the chicken cages. Just as she was pulling the back door shut, however, she caught sight of some blood on the snow only a few meters from the house.
I must clean it up right away, or else there could be trouble. She hurried to collect her broom and stepped out again into the icy night. But the blood did not stop there. She followed it with her broom all the way to the pine trees behind the house. The snow had also been disturbed. Someone had clearly dragged themselves through it toward the woods. There, by an old grave tucked in between the trees, she spotted a large black mound on the snow. Charity approached to get a better look. A body! One of the men Chu-Chuji had been fighting earlier. She was about to go and wake her husband to ask him to bury it, when it struck her that someone could come past at any moment and see the body. No, it would be better to pull it into a nearby bush and then go and tell her husband. She edged toward it, and, summoning all her strength, she took hold of its black clothes and pulled. Suddenly, the body twitched and groaned. Was it a ghost? Fear paralyzed her. She watched it for a minute or so, but it did not move. Reaching for her broom, she gently poked it. The body groaned again, only this time the sound was much quieter. He was still alive. She approached and peered over the body. There, embedded in the back of his shoulder, was a large wolf-fang arrow. One sec, I'm going to see if there's a footnote for what a wolf-fang arrow is. That's page 1. Oh, geez. That's a big footnote. That's not for this, though. Oh, okay. I'm going to backtrack a little here. I'm sorry. So remember back when the infants to be were being named? Where are you? Oh, that's too many pages back. Hello. That's going to happen a lot. So this book has it's not one of those mass production uh, made to order, printed to order books where everything is dead even for page size, physical page size, piece of paper size. So they're all different sizes, which gives it this nice ruffled look on the actual pages when you're looking at them. But unfortunately means that sometimes I'm going to butterfinger some pages. Okay, here we go. So when Chu-Chuji was naming the children, here we go. Chu-Chuji sipped from his bowl of rice wine and thought for a while. For Master Guo's child, I suggest Guo Jing, meaning serenity, and for Master Yang's child, Yang Kang, meaning vitality. This will remind them of the humiliation of the year Jing Kang, when Kaifeng was sacked and the emperor captured by the Jin. These names can be used for girls just as well as boys. So in the appendix, there's actually a reference to this on that page, the Jingkang incident. In the year 1127, the Jurchen were on the march southward and sacked the Song capital of Kaifeng. The Jurchen, for the record, are Mongolians, I believe, if memory serves. Yes, northern Chinese at the very least. Mongolians. I'm pretty sure they're Mongolians. During the raid, they captured the Song Emperor, Qinzong, along with his father, Emperor Huizong, and several of the imperial family, effectively bringing the period of the Northern Song to an end. Having lost large parts of the Chinese hinterland, what was left of the Chinese Empire fled south and settled in Linan, but the psychological damage caused by the incident was to send ripples throughout the centuries and still looms large in the Chinese cultural mind. It should be noted here that references to years in the Western Dionysian system are merely for the convenience of the reader. In Chinese tradition, years were counted according to the lunar calendar from when an emperor declared a new era name. The name was designed to act like a motto or statement of intent for the emperor who chose it. Before the Ming and Qing dynasties, emperors often declared several different era names over the course of their time in power. The Jing Kang incident is therefore named after the particular era name in which the event occurred, the meaning being serenity and vitality, reflecting a desire for peace and prosperity in such a tumultuous time politically, which makes it highly appropriate for their names in that specific context, for that specific culture that you would not know otherwise without the explanation. Thank you for the explanations. So, pretty cool. I'm going to double check through here. Oh, I should probably mention some of these. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to wait till I'm done with the segment I'm going to read and bracket time to do explanations afterward. That is what I will do. We are, I think, coming up on that soonish in a couple pages, so I will do the rest of those then. Yeah, I think that's going to make more sense, and that's going to be easier for me to keep track of rather than interrupting constantly. It's just not going to work. I sort of wish they had had an actual footnote with a numerical reference, as some books do, but we are not doing that here apparently. I don't know if that's I don't know whose decision it was to do it the way they did, but it would have been easier, I guess, to work with. I think part of that's just that I'm accustomed to this book I'm reading right now called Judgment at Tokyo, which is an actual uh, historical book about the Tokyo trials in the wake of World War II, which is it explains a lot actually. Like it's remarkable how far-reaching the consequences of that trial wound up being. It's one I would actually not dislike reading on stream, to be honest. It's relatively engaging. It's just a smidge dry, but not as dry as I was afraid of being. Okay, so going back to wherever we were, that's where I skipped back from. Yes. Yes, okay. You know what? I'm going to take the chapter from the top for the nth time, because I don't remember where I left off. I'm sorry. Chapter 3. 3! There is no chapter, just a number. It is 3. Yang was slumped at the table, playing with the dagger, more drunk than he had realized. Charity helped her husband into bed and collected the dishes. The navy blue sky was dotted with stars, but there was still enough light for her to go outside and collect the chicken eggs. Just as she was pulling the back door shut, however, she caught sight of some blood on the snow only a few meters from the house. "I must clean it up right away, or else there could be trouble." She hurried to collect her broom and stepped out again into the icy night. But the blood did not stop there. She followed it with her broom all the way to the pine trees behind the house. The snow had also been disturbed. Someone had clearly dragged themselves through it toward the woods. There, by an old grave tucked in between the trees, she spotted a large black mound on the snow. Charity approached to get a better look. A body. One of the men Chu-Chuji had been fighting earlier. She was about to go and wake her husband to ask him to bury it, when it struck her that someone could come past at any moment and see the body. No, it would be better to pull it into a nearby bush and then go and tell her husband. She edged toward it, and summoning all her strength, she took hold of its black clothes and pulled. Suddenly the body twitched and groaned. Was it a ghost? Fear paralyzed her. She watched it for a minute or so, but it did not move. Reaching for her broom, she gently poked it. The body groaned again, only this time the sound was much quieter. He was still alive. She approached and peered over the body. There, embedded in the back of his shoulder, was a large wolf-fang arrow. The snow was still falling, albeit much lighter now, and a thin layer of snowflakes had settled on the young man's face. He would soon freeze to death out here. Charity had always been exceptionally kind-hearted, ever since she was a young girl. She was forever bringing home injured sparrows, frogs, and even insects, which she would nurse back to health, and those she could not save she would bury, the tears flowing down her cheeks. Her father, a country scholar from Red Plum Village, had named her for this unusual sensitivity, and her mother was never allowed to slaughter any of their roosters or hens. Any chickens served at the Bow family table for dinner had to be brought home from the market. Indeed, Charity had not changed much as she grew older, and this was one of the things Ironheart Yang loved about her. Their backyard was still a sanctuary for chickens, ducks, and every other sort of small creature that chose to make its home there. There was no way she could let this man die in the snow. She knew he must be bad, but she could not leave him here. She scrambled to her feet and ran back to the house to discuss it with her husband. But Yang had fallen into a deep sleep, and no matter how she shook him, he would not wake up. It was nap time. Deciding that she should save the man first and worry about the consequences later, she ran to the herbal medicine cabinet and fetched her husband's blood-clotting powder, and then found a small knife and some pieces of cloth. She grabbed the jug of warm wine that was still on the stove and ran back outside. He had not moved. Charity helped him sit up, and she trickled the leftover wine into his mouth. She knew a bit of basic medicine. The arrow sat deep in his flesh. Pulling it out might cause him to lose a lot of blood. But if she did not remove it, there would be no way of caring for the wound. So she took a breath, cut around the arrowhead, and tugged as hard as she could. The man screamed and instantly passed out. Blood spurted from the wound, covering her shirt in bright red splashes. Her heart was thumping in her chest, but, steadying her shaking hands, she sprinkled the blood-clotting powder over the sore and bandaged it as tight as she could with the scraps of cloth. After a short time he began to regain consciousness. Charity was so frightened her arms could barely muster the strength to hold the man up, let alone move him. But she had an idea. She went to the small barn by the side of the house and found a loose wooden plank. She pushed the plank under the man and shunted him onto it, and then dragged the plank through the snow back to the barn, as if pulling a sled. That's thinking with your head. I appreciate that. That's clever. Knowing he was safely sheltered, she crept back inside the house to change out of her bloodied shirt and wash her face and hands. She then ladled a bowl of leftover chicken soup, lit a candle, and went back to the barn. His breathing was now steady, if weak. Charity approached the man and urged him to sit up again so that she could feed him the soup. She held the bowl to the man's lips with her right hand, and in her left she moved the candle so that the warm glow highlighted his sculpted features and elegant nose. This was the first time she had been able to take a good look at his face, and she almost gasped. He was so handsome. The blood rose in her cheeks, and her hand began to tremble, splashing a drop of candle wax onto his smooth forehead. He winced, and for the first time looked up at her. There, before him, was a face as delicate as a flower, two cheeks flushed pink like a rose petals, and a pair of kind eyes sparkling like stars reflected in a river. "Are you feeling any better?" Charity whispered. "Here, drink the rest of the soup." The man tried to take the bowl in his hands, but he was too weak and nearly spilled the hot broth on himself. There we go. Emphasis. On the right syllable. Charity quickly took the bowl back and continued to feed him, one spoonful at a time. By the time he finished the bowl, some color had returned to his cheeks. He looked up at the heavenly creature nursing him with such care, but Charity squirmed under his gaze. Hastily she clambered to her feet and fetched an armful of straw to keep him warm. Taking the candle with her, she slipped out of the barn and back inside the house. She did not sleep well that night. Her husband was plunging his spear through the man's chest. The man lunged at her husband with his saber. The man chased her between the pine trees. Every few hours she woke from a new nightmare, damp with sweat. As the sun warmed her eyelids, she began to stir, and she turned to discover that the other side of the bed was empty. She sat up. Had her husband found the man? She climbed down, folded the quilt, put on her outer robe, and hurried to the front room. He was sitting at the table, sharpening the head of his spear. She nodded before slipping outside toward the barn and pushing open the door. But she saw no one there, just a messy pile of straw. The man had gone. There, beyond the barn, a fresh trail in the snow led out toward the pine trees behind the house. For a minute or so she was lost in her thoughts as she stared out in the direction in which the man had left. A gust of icy wind rushed at her cheeks, and as if wakening her to her body. It's an interesting phrase. A gust of icy wind rushed at her cheeks, and, as if wakening her to her body, she felt a sharp pain in her stomach, and her legs buckled. She stumbled back inside, where her husband greeted her with a proud grin. I made you. Is Yang her husband? Or is it Guo? Yes, it's Yang. Yang? Yeah? I think it's Yang. I made you and the baby some rice porridge. We'll go with that. She smiled weakly and sat. He would only get angry and jealous if he knew about the events the previous night. So, she reasoned, she would have to keep them to herself. Winter Winter gasped its last breath, and spring returned. Charity's belly had ballooned, and preparations for the baby's arrival had pushed almost all thoughts of the man in black from her mind. The Yang family had just finished dinner, and Charity was huddled by the small pool of light cast by their lamp, sewing new clothes for her husband. Yang was hanging up the 2 pairs of straw sandals he had just finished weaving, ready for the spring. I'm going to see Carpenter Zhang tomorrow to see if he can fix the plow I broke this morning. Yang looked over at his wife. Please don't make any more clothes. Rest, my dear. Think of the baby. Charity looked up at her husband and smiled, her fingers still moving the needles swiftly through the cloth. Yang walked over to where she was sitting and took the sewing from her. Charity stretched, blew out the lamp, and together they went to bed. At midnight, Charity was suddenly snapped out of her dreams by her husband sitting up in bed. In the distance, to the west, came a faint sound of hooves drumming against the dirt. Before long it could be heard from all directions. Why are there so many horses? Yang jumped down from the bed and started dressing. The drumming was growing louder. A neighbor's dog started barking. We're being surrounded. What's happening? Charity's voice was trembling. I have no idea, her husband replied, handing her the dagger Chuji had given them. Take this to protect yourself. He unhooked his spear from the wall. By now, the sound of hooves had subsided into an intermittent clatter, largely drowned out by the horses neighing and their masters shouting. Yang opened one of the shutters at the front of the house and looked outside. A company of soldiers had surrounded the entire village, the light from their torches illuminating his neighbors' cottages. Some of the riders were struggling to still their excited horses as they rode among the houses. Find the traitors! The man in charge shouted to his men. They must not get away! Were they here for Kusan? Yang had not seen the tavern keeper since before winter had come and gone. Even he would struggle to fight off so many men. Suddenly, one of the soldiers shouted something that made Yang's heart freeze in his chest. Sky Fury Guo, Ironheart Yang, come out now and face the consequences of your treacherous actions! Charity had joined her husband by the window. These words made the blood drain from her cheeks.
They come chasing innocent citizens when the traitors are among their own ranks, Ironheart said. Sky Fury and I can't possibly fight so many men at once. Our only option is to run. Don't worry, I will protect you with my spear.
He fetched a bow, slung it across his back, and wedged some arrows in his belt. He then reached for his wife's hand and squeezed it tightly.
I'll pack, she replied. Pack? We're leaving everything.
But our home. A tear had crept from the corner of her eye and was making its way down her cheek.
We've got to focus on getting away first. We can start another home elsewhere.
But what about the chickens and the cats?
Silly girl, thinking about them at a time like this?
He paused and then continued.
What would they do with your chickens and cats?
They eat chickens. Just then a red-orange light came flickering through the window, throwing shadows across their simple furniture. The soldiers had just set fire to 2 thatched cottages nearby. 2 foot soldiers were walking toward them along the main road through the village.
Sky Fury Guo, Ironheart Yang. If you don't come out now, we'll set the fire to the whole village.
A red rage rose in Yang, and before Charity could stop him, he had opened the door and stepped out.
I am Ironheart Yang. What do you want?
2 soldiers dropped their torches in fright and backed away. One of the other men rode his horse up to the front of the Yang family house and stopped.
So you are Ironheart Yang? Come with us to see the magistrate.
Turning to the foot soldiers, the man barked,
Take him!
4 men ran toward him. Yang twirled his spear in a rainbow crosses the sky and swept 3 of the soldiers to the ground. He followed this with a deafening spring thunder, picking up... Incidentally, I should probably note here, every time they're naming one of their attack sequences / moves, those are capitalized. So they all, like rainbow crosses the sky, as a capital R, C, and S. So these are names. These moves are characters in their own right. Thank you. So they have proper titles. Thanks. Just like a book. Or a person. He followed this with a deafening spring thunder, picking up one of the soldiers with the shaft of his spear and throwing him into 2 other men.
First you must tell me what crimes I'm being charged with. Traitor! The man on the horse bellowed. How dare you resist arrest?
He may have sounded brave, but he was noticeably reluctant to come any closer. Another man on horseback drew level with the first man.
Come without a fight, and there will be no new charges to add to your existing crimes. We have the official documents for your arrest here.
Let me see them.
What about the other traitor, Sky Fury Guo?
Sky Fury thrust his upper body out of the window of his house, along with a bow and arrow, and called, Here I am! He aimed the arrow at the first man on horseback.
Put down your bow. Only then will I read the document to you.
Read it now. Guo pulled the arrow all the way back. Glancing at the other man on horseback, he rolled out the document and began reading.
Sky Fury Guo and Ironheart Yang of Ox Village, Linan Prefecture, are charged with collusion with the intent of wrongdoing. A warrant for their arrest has been issued in accordance with the laws of the Great Song Empire in the name of the Ningzong Emperor.
Which official issued the order? Guo asked.
Chancellor Han himself.
Guo and Yang were taken aback. What have we done that could merit the ire of Chancellor Han? Yang thought to himself. Did they find out about Chu Chuji's visit?
Who is the accuser?
Guo added. Based on what evidence?
We only have orders to capture you and bring you to the court at Linan. If you want to plead your case, you can do so with the judge.
The court at Linan only knows how to harass innocent citizens. Everyone knows that. Guo called back. We're not falling for that lie. He shifted his arrow so it was now pointing at this soldier.
So you are resisting arrest?
The first man on horseback called back.
Another crime to add to the list.
Yang turned to his wife and whispered,
Quickly, put on some more clothes. I'll get his horse for you. Once I shoot their commanding officer, the rest of the men will panic.
He drew his bow from his bag and shot an arrow, hitting the officer in charge in the chest.
Hi-ya!
The force knocked him from his horse, and he fell with a thud into the dirt. The soldiers started shouting in surprise. So really I should have said, "Ay-ya!"
Seize them!
Shh! The soldiers started shouting in surprise. "Seize them!" The foot soldiers ran forward. Yang and Guo began firing arrows as fast as they could, and within seconds they had killed 7 more men between them. But there were still too many soldiers. Howling, Ironheart Yang swung his spear up above his head and charged forward. The soldiers shrank back in surprise and fear. He made straight for an official sitting astride a white horse and lunged his excuse me. Hiccups are bad. He made straight for an official sitting astride a white horse and lunged his spear at him. The man tried to block it with his own lance, but Yang was too quick, plunging his spear deep into the official's thigh. He lifted the man like a piece of meat on the end of a skewer and flicked him from his horse. Yang then dug the other end of his spear into the ground and flipped himself onto the back of the horse. Squeezing his calves, he jolted the horse forward. It reared before leaping straight toward the house. Yang speared another soldier by the door, leaned down and scooped Charity up with one arm.
Brother, follow me!
Guo was spinning his double halberd at the crowd of men, holding his wife behind him with his other hand. The remaining soldiers were frightened and began shooting arrows in panic. Yang galloped over to Guo and Lily and dropped down from the horse's back.
Sister, get on!
Against her protests, he threw her up onto the horse. Charity took hold of the reins and started to move the horse forward. The 2 men followed on foot, spearing and slicing any soldiers brave enough to approach. Suddenly, a thundering of hooves sounded in the west. Yang and Guo glanced at each other and started looking for an escape route. Just then, Charity screamed. The horse had been hit by an arrow. It lurched forward and landed on its front knees, before falling to its side and throwing the 2 women to the ground.
Brother, you look after them, Yang said. I'll get another horse.
There we go. Clutching his spear, Yang ran straight into the crowd of soldiers ahead. A dozen or so formed a line, raising their bows at Yang. There were just too many soldiers, Guo reasoned, and their chances of escaping with their wives, with a W, was not looking good. Perhaps they should give themselves up and argue their case in court. None of the men had survived the fight against Chu Chuji that winter's afternoon, so there could be no witness to say that they had been a part of it, let alone killed any of the soldiers themselves. "Ironheart, stop!" Guo called. "Let's go with them." Yang halted in surprise and ran back, dragging his spear in the dirt. The officer in command of this second group of soldiers ordered the men not to shoot and instead to surround the traitors.
Throw down your weapons, and you will be spared. Brother, don't fall for their lies,
Yang hissed. Guo shook his head, looked his friend straight in the eye, and, holding his gaze, threw his double halberd to the dirt. Yang looked across at his wife. Fear seemed to reach out of her eyes and cling to him. He sighed and threw his spear to the ground. 10 spearheads appeared inches from their faces, and 8 foot soldiers stepped forward to bind their hands. Yang held his head high. A sneer spread across his face. The officer in charge walked his horse forward and lashed Yang across the cheek with his whip.
Damn traitor, are you really not afraid to die?
And what's your name? Came Yang's reply, a snarl rather than a question. This drove the man on the horse even wilder with rage.
Justice Dwan, His Excellency Dwan to you, and don't forget it. You can tell them about me when you reach the gates of hell.
Yang stared back at the man without blinking, his eyes fixed on Dwan's.
I've got a scar on my forehead, on a birthmark on my right cheek, Dwan continued. Know who I am now?
At this, he whipped Yang across the other cheek.
He's a good man. He's done nothing wrong, Charity called out. Why are you beating him?
Yang spat at Dwan, and a globule of phlegm landed on his birthmark. Furious, Dwan pulled out his saber.
I'm going to kill you right now, you disgusting traitor!
He lifted his saber high above his head and brought it down in a clumsy slash. It was not hard for Yang to step out of the way. Two foot soldiers moved their spears to Yang's sides and pushed the metal tips against his taut muscles, pincering him. Dwan raised his saber again and swung it down somewhat more elegantly than before. Unable to move sideways, Yang could only pull back. Despite appearances, Dwan had in fact practiced some martial arts, and immediately he thrust his saber forward. The blade had a saw-toothed edge, and this time he managed to swipe it through Yang's left shoulder. He pulled back again for another chop. At that moment, Guo jumped up and thrust his feet at Dwan's face. Dwan tried to block Guo's feet with his saber, but despite having his hands tied behind his back, Guo managed to twirl his left leg away and around. Guo managed to twirl his left leg away and round Dwan's sword, while jabbing his right foot into Dwan's stomach.
Spear them!
Dwan coughed.
Our orders were to kill them should they resist arrest.
But Guo had kicked two men to the ground. Dwan came from behind him and swung his saber down hard, severing Guo's right arm at the shoulder. Yang had been trying to struggle free from the ropes around his wrists, but seeing his oldest friend so badly wounded gave him a new surge of strength. He snapped his bonds, punched the closest soldier, and grabbed his spear. By now he had nothing to lose. He could fight, or they would all die. He speared two more in quick succession. Dwan shrank back in fear. He could see renewed and ferocious determination in Yang's eyes, the fear of killing government troops now gone. The remaining soldiers ran. Rather than give chase, Yang turned to his friend. He crouched down beside Guo. Blood was pumping from the wound in crimson spurts, and his cream robe was already drenched down one side. Tears ran like rivulets down his cheeks. Guo forced a smile.
Ironheart, don't worry about me. Go! Go!
I'm going to fetch a horse, Yang said. Whatever happens, I'm going to save you.
No, don't worry.
Guo passed out. Ironheart Yang removed his shirt so he could bandage up the wound. But Dwan's sword had sliced through Guo's shoulder and into his chest. It would be impossible to stem the bleeding. Guo came round again and called,
Brother, save our wives. I'm not going to make it.
Then he gasped and died. Ever since they were little, the two friends had always thought of each other as flesh and blood. Rage surged in Yang's chest, and he recalled that they had once sworn to each other, "Together we will die, same day, same month, same year." Yang looked around him. He had no idea what had happened to their wives amid the chaos.
Brother, I will avenge your death!
He cried out, grabbing hold of his spear and charging toward the nearest group of soldiers. By now, the soldiers had resumed their formation. Justice Duan issued an order, and a swarm of arrows came flying straight at Yang. But he marched ahead through the storm, knocking the arrows aside. One military officer swung his saber hard at Ironheart's head, but Ironheart ducked and tucked himself underneath the belly of his horse. The saber was left to swipe blindly through the air. The officer was trying to turn his horse when a spear pierced through his back and into his heart. Yang lifted the corpse and flicked it off the end of his spear before mounting. He waved his spear at the remaining soldiers. None dared fight him, choosing instead to flee. Yang continued to chase them for a while until he caught sight of one of the officers riding away, with a woman slung over his horse. Ironheart jumped down from his horse and skewered one of the foot soldiers with his spear. Taking the soldier's bow and arrow, he aimed as best he could, with the light from the burning houses as his only guide, pulled back and fired. The arrow speared the horses behind, sending the animal to its knees, and the two riders tumbling to the ground. Ironheart fired another arrow, killing the officer. He then ran over to the woman, who was struggling to sit up. It's possible I should have made a warning saying that this is actually fairly violent. Maybe should have done that. It's not too graphic, sexy time wise. We do have wooing occurring. Oh my gosh, that's a fairly long subchapter. We will try and bang through it though, because it gets us to a fairly logical stopping point, and this one isn't as logical a stopping point as I would have liked. 4. Charity threw herself into her husband's arms in relief.
"Where is our sister Lily Lee?"
Yang asked.
"Up ahead. She was captured by soldiers." "Stay here and wait for me. I'm going to find her."
"But there are more soldiers coming,"
Charity replied, aghast. Ironheart turned to watch a cluster of torches approaching. Line break. Sorry, at a weird spot. Let's try that again. Ironheart turned to watch a cluster of torches approaching.
"Brother Guo is dead," Yang said, turning back to Charity. "I have to find Lily Lee to save his family line. The heavens will take pity on us. I will come back for you."
Charity clung to her husband's neck and would not let go.
"We were never to part," she said, tears gathering. "You said so yourself. We're going to die together."
Ironheart took her in his arms and kissed her. He then peeled her arms from around his neck and picked up his spear. He ran a few dozen meters, then stopped and looked back. There she sat, crouched in the dust, crying. The soldiers were upon her. Ironheart turned and wiped the mixture of tears, sweat, and blood from his cheeks with his sleeve. The Guo family must have descendants. He carried onward on foot until he spotted a stray horse and a man nearby.
"Which way do the soldiers go?" he demanded.
"That way."
The man pointed. Ironheart belted his horse with his heel and spurred onward. Then a scream. A woman's scream in the woods by the road. He jerked the horse round and charged straight at the trees. Lily Lee had wrestled her hands free from the ropes and was fighting off two foot soldiers. She was a strong, robust country girl. The foot soldiers laughed and cursed, but they could not overcome her. Ironheart was upon them, and with two jabs speared them both. He then pulled Lily up behind him, and together they raced back to where he had left his wife. But there was no one to be found. Morning was approaching. Ironheart dismounted his horse and searched for any trace of his wife by the day's first light. There, a trail. Someone had been dragged through the dirt. His wife, captured by soldiers. Ironheart jumped back up onto the horse and booted it in the stomach. The horse was galloping at full speed when a bugle sounded, and a group of 10 soldiers dressed in black and on horseback charged onto the path. The first man was wielding a wolf-fang club, but Ironheart blocked it, parrying with his spear. The man then planed the club toward Ironheart's stomach, an unusual move in these parts. The wolf-fang club was a heavy weapon and not generally popular in the Wulin. The Jin army, however, were known to favor it. The Jurchen had grown up strong in the fight against the freezing climate east of the Liao River. When the Jin invaded the north, the wolf-fang club had been their weapon of choice. Ironheart was growing suspicious and recalled his brother's words. Judging by range and quality of the man's skills, he must be of high rank in the Jin army. But what was he doing here? Ironheart quickened his spear and struck the man from his horse. The rest fled in shock. Ironheart turned to check that Lily Lee was unhurt. At that moment, an arrow whistled through the air toward him and buried itself in his back. "Brother!" Lily Lee cried. It felt like ice piercing his heart. "So this is it," Ironheart said to himself. "But I must defeat these men first, so Lily can escape." With the last of his strength he lifted his spear, spurred his horse, and rushed at the new crowd of soldiers that had appeared. But the pain was too much. A dark curtain drew across his eyes, and he fainted, slumped over his horse.
"5. The moment her iron heart had pushed her away, Charity felt as if her heart had been sliced in two by her husband's own blade. The soldiers were upon her within seconds. There was no escape. One of the officers held a torch to her face. "It's her," he said. "Who'd have guessed those 2 Southerners alone could have caused our men such injury?"
At least we can say we were the ones to complete the job," another said. "They'll have to give us at least 10 taels of silver for our efforts."
"Huh!" the first officer snorted. "I'll just be happy if the generals leave a few coins for us." He turned to the bugler. "Time to go back." The bugler brought his instrument to his lips and blew. They kept riding. Charity tried to swallow her tears. What had happened to her husband? The sun had now risen. People started to appear on the road, but they slipped away again at the sight of the soldiers. Charity was surprised, however, to find the men polite in both word and deed, so after some time she began to relax. After several more li, they heard shouts coming from up ahead. Another group of men clad in black charged at them from the side of the road. "Disgusting vermin!" their leader shouted. "Murdering innocent subjects! Get down from your horses!" The highest-ranking officer was furious. "How dare you bandits show your faces out here on the outskirts of the capital? Get away, now!" The men in black rushed forward. What they lacked in numbers, they made up for with their superior kung fu. Charity was quietly excited. Maybe her dear Ironheart's friends had come to rescue her. In the chaos, an arrow came flying toward Charity from behind and hit her horse in the rump. It jerked and began racing forward. Charity desperately wrapped her arms around the horse's neck for fear of falling. Before long she heard the beating of hooves against the dirt behind her. A black horse drew level with hers and then edged in front. The man riding it was spinning a rope, and with a swish it flew through the air and looped over the head of Charity's horse. The man pulled on the rope, drawing them level and then slowing them. He whistled, stopping his animal dead. Charity's horse was pulled to a halt, neighing and rearing. Charity was worn out after such a long and eventful night. Terror and grief had weakened her so she could no longer hold the reins. She fainted, flopping from the horse and to the ground. Flopping from the horse and to the ground. There we go. Charity felt herself waking gradually. She did not know how long she had been asleep. A cozy feeling cloaked her, and she imagined herself to be lying on a soft bed, wrapped in a thick cotton quilt. As she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was a fine green canopy decorated with flowers above her, and as she turned, a lamp lit on a bedside table. Was she imagining it? Or was there a man in black sitting by her bed? Hearing her stir, the man stood up and parted the bed curtains. "Are you awake?" he whispered. Charity was still half asleep, but the man seemed familiar. "You have a fever," the man murmured, placing his hand on her forehead. "Don't worry, the doctor will be here soon." Dazed, Charity fell back into the comfort of sleep. Later, she was dimly aware of a doctor examining her and someone feeding her medicine. She felt almost paralyzed by exhaustion. Then, suddenly, "Ironheart! My dear Ironheart!" She broke from her dream with a start. Someone stroked her shoulder, consoled her. The sun was high in the sky by the time she next woke. A groan rose from deep within her. Someone came to the bed and pulled aside the curtain. She looked at him, and shock shot through her. The handsome, friendly-looking man standing before her was none other than the injured soldier she had saved in the snow all those months ago. "Where am I? Where is my husband?" The young man gestured for her to be quiet.
"There are soldiers everywhere out there looking for us. We're staying with a local farmer. Your humble servant begs your forgiveness, my lady. I had to lie to the farmer and say that I am your husband. Please don't say anything."
Charity blushed and nodded.
"Where's my husband?" "My lady is still weak. I will tell you everything once you feel better."
A jolt went through Charity. The tone of his voice was enough to tell her it was serious. She gripped the corner of her quilt and asked again, her voice shaking.
What happened?" "Worrying will accomplish nothing now. Your health is the most important thing." "Is he dead?" she pressed. "Was Squire Yang tall, with broad shoulders, around 20? Did he use a spear?" "Yes, that's him. That's him."
Knowing he had no choice but to tell her, he nodded.
"Squire Yang was unlucky. Those hateful soldiers killed him."
He shook his head and sighed. Pain pulsed in her chest, and she fainted. When she came to again, she instantly began sobbing. The man tried to soothe her.
"How did he die?"
She stuttered between sobs.
"I saw him fighting a group of soldiers earlier today. He killed a few of them, but then one of the soldiers crept up behind him and stabbed him in the back with his spear."
The shock temporarily knocked her out again. For the rest of the day she neither drank nor ate. The man did not force her, and instead attempted to distract her with chatter. After some time, Charity began to feel guilty for not asking the man any questions.
"May I ask sir's name? How did you know we were in trouble and needed help?"
"My surname is Yan. My given name is Lieh. I was passing by with my friends, and we saw those soldiers harassing you. We decided to help, and as it turns out, the heavens decreed that I should save my own savior. We were destined to meet again."
His words made her blush, and she turned away from him. But her mind was working as his story struck her as suspicious. She turned back to speak. Sorry.
She turned back to face him. "Are you one of them?" Yan Lie looked surprised. "Weren't you one of the soldiers who tried to capture the Taoist that day? That's how you got hurt?" "I was unlucky, that's all. I was coming south and was passing through your village on my way to Linan. But then an arrow came out of nowhere and hit me in the back. If it weren't for my lady's benevolence, I would have died out there." "But why were they trying to catch the monk? Taoists catch ghosts. Why would a soldier want to catch a monk?" "Taoists catch ghosts. Why would a soldier want to catch a monk? They've got it all muddled." He looked amused. "So you were just passing through? You weren't with them? I thought you were also coming after the Taoist. Sorry. I wasn't sure I should help you that day." She then went on to tell him why the soldiers were there and how Chu Chuji killed them all. Charity continued talking until she caught him staring at her, captivated. She fell silent. "My apologies," he smiled. "I was just thinking about how we're going to escape without getting caught by the soldiers." Charity started to cry.
My husband's gone. How can I live on? It is my duty as his wife. I should do the honorable thing."
"Madam, your husband was murdered by rebel soldiers and his death is yet to be avenged. How can you think of suicide? Squire Yang was a hero in life. He'll never find peace beneath the 9 springs of the underworld if he hears you talking like that."
"But I'm just a feeble woman. How can I possibly avenge his death?"
"My lady's burden," Yang Lie said in righteous anger, "I will gladly assume. Do you know who the culprit is?"
Charity thought for a while before answering.
Their leader was called Justice Duan. He has a scar on his forehead and a birthmark on his cheek."
We have a name and distinguishing features. It doesn't matter if he runs to the ends of the earth or the corners of the sea. We will bring him to justice."
He went outside and came back with a bowl of rice porridge and some peeled salted eggs.
"But you won't get your revenge if you don't take care of your health first."
Charity agreed that this made sense, took the bowl, and started to eat. She then fell back into a fitful sleep. The next morning Charity arranged her clothes and got out of bed. She went to the mirror and brushed her hair, found a piece of white cloth and fixed a white flower in her hair, out of respect for her husband. But the sight of the beautiful woman in the mirror, widowed at such a young age, plunged her back into the depths of her grief, and she started weeping bitterly. Just then Yan Lie walked in. He waited for a pause in her sobs.
"The soldiers have retreated. Let's be on our way," he said softly. "Let's be on our way," he said softly.
Charity followed him. Followed. One sec. Charity followed him out. Yan Lie handed the master of the house a piece of silver, then brought the 2 horses round. Her horse's wound had been taken care of.
"Where to now?"
Charity asked. Yan Lie hushed her with a look, and helped her up onto her horse. Together they began riding northward, side by side.
"Where are you taking me?"
Charity asked again, several li thence.
"First we're going to find somewhere to lie low. Once everything is calmed, I will go back and bury your husband. Then I will kill Justice Duan."
Charity was mild in character and rarely put forward her own suggestions. Furthermore, the events of the previous night had left her all alone in the world, and she was just grateful that Yan Lie had a plan.
"Master Yan, how am I ever to repay you?"
"My lady, you were the one to save me," he exclaimed. "I will be your humble servant for the rest of my days, through fire and rain, even in the face of the cruelest torture."
"I only hope we can kill that horrible man as soon as possible, so that I can join my husband in the knowledge he has been avenged."
Tears tumbled down her cheeks.
They rode for a full day before stopping for the night at an inn in Chang'an. Yan Lie told the innkeeper that they were married and got one room. This made Charity extremely nervous, but she remained silent, and instead gripped Chu Chuji's dagger under her clothes.
If he does anything untoward, I'll kill myself, she decided.
Yan Lie instructed one of the men to bring them 2 bundles of rice straw. Once the man left, he locked the door and arranged the bundles on the floor. He then lay down on one of them and drew a rug over himself.
Sleep well, my lady, he said, and closed his eyes.
Charity's heart was thumping. Thoughts of her dead husband tore at her insides, and she sat staring into the darkness for over an hour before eventually blowing out the candle with a sigh. Clutching the dagger, she climbed onto her bundle of straw and slept in her clothes. By the time Charity woke the next day, Yan Lie had already readied the horses and was requesting breakfast. Charity was grateful he was proving to be such a gentleman, and began to think perhaps she need not be so worried. Breakfast consisted of fried strips of chicken and tofu, ham, sliced sausage, smoked fish, and a small pot of the most deliciously fragrant rice porridge. Charity was from a simple but honest background, and had lived off the land since marrying into the Yang family. Breakfast for her usually consisted of pickles and a small piece of tofu. She only got to eat such varied fare at spring festival or wedding banquets. She ate, but felt a little uncomfortable. After they finished, an inn boy came in with a bundle. Yan Lie had already left the room.
What's this? Charity asked.
As soon as the sun was up, master went out and bought new clothes for madam. He says you are to wear them.
He placed the bundle on the floor and left. Charity opened the bundle and was surprised to find a mourning dress. Mourning. A mourning dress made from white silk, with a complete set of matching accessories, from stockings, shoes, underwear, to a padded jacket, silk scarf, and sash.
He's thought of everything, she muttered. What an unusual young man.
She dressed in her new clothes, but just knowing Yan Lie had selected them made her blush. She had left home in a hurry, and her own clothes were now torn and dirty after a night on the road. The new outfit did cheer her a little. When Yan Lie returned, she noticed he too was dressed in expensive new clothes. And so they set off again, riding in single file, or sometimes side by side. Spring was just turning into summer south of the Yangtze. So we've been through like 3 whole seasons in a short period of time. We're going to have like random time skips, by the way. Mostly they are delineated by them saying time has passed, as they just did, but sometimes you just have to take it on faith. The time scale in all this is very strange. You get used to it, but it's like it's pretty loosey goosey. I mean that in basically a good way. It feels very much like reading a kung fu movie, because most kung fu movies of the type that this is like were modeled after this. So there is probably a reason. Where were we? Oh, yes. And so they set off again, riding in single file, or sometimes side by side. Spring was just turning into summer south of the Yangtze. Willows by the side of the road reached out and brushed against their shoulders as they passed. Flowers filled the air with their intoxicating scent, and the fields were covered in a green quilt of new shoots. Yan Lie spent the entire journey idly chatting in order to distract Charity from her grief. There we go. Charity's father, a minor scholar, was the most educated man of their small village, and her husband and his sworn brother had both been straightforward, simple men. Never had she met a man as refined and cultured as Yan Lieh. His every word revealed a depth and sharpness of thought. But they seemed to be heading farther and farther north, away from Linan, and he had not mentioned the subject of avenging her husband's unjust death all day. She could hold back no longer.
Master Yan, do you know the whereabouts of my husband's body?
Of course, I wish to look for Squire Yang's body and give him a proper burial. It's just that I killed government men while rescuing my lady. Right now, it's very dangerous for me to go back there. They would kill me as soon as I set foot in Linan. In any case, soldiers are out everywhere looking for my lady. Squire Yang committed treason by killing officials of the Song Empire, after all, and that's a serious crime. When they capture the relatives of a traitor, the men are beheaded and the women forced into prostitution. I'm not so worried about my own safety, but I couldn't leave my lady without protection. They would do terrible things to you.
So, justice is rough out here. Charity nodded at his sincerity. Or rather, punishments are harsh.
I have given the matter considerable thought, Yan Lieh continued. The most important thing is to give your husband a proper burial. So we are headed for Jiaxing.
Let's go with that. Jiaxing.
Jiaxing.
I think.
Jiaxing, where I can obtain... So we are headed for Jiaxing, where I can obtain enough silver to send someone to Linan to take care of it. If Madam will only find peace in the knowledge that I have organized it personally, then I will first make sure you are safe in Jiaxing, and then go back myself.
Charity thought it would be expecting too much to ask him to take such a big risk for her, so she replied,
If Master can find someone trustworthy to handle it, then I suppose that will do.
She paused, and then continued,
My husband also had a friend, they were sworn brothers, by the name of Sky Fury Guo. He died alongside my husband. I am sorry to trouble you by asking this, but if you could ensure that he too is buried properly, well, I would...
She was interrupted by her own tears.
It's no trouble, Yang Lieh replied. Just leave it to me. As for avenging their deaths, the traitor Justice Duan is a government official, so it's going to be difficult to kill him. Besides, we need to be especially careful right now. We're going to have to be patient and wait for our moment.
Charity knew Yan Lieh was right, but she was desperate to see Justice Duan dead so she could join her husband in the next world. But who knew when such an opportunity would arise? She would have to be patient. The tears flowed even faster.
I don't care about getting revenge, she stuttered between sobs. Even a hero like my husband was unable to defeat him. I'm just a wretched woman. How can I wait for him to be brought to justice? Just let me join my husband.
Yan Lieh paused to think.
Madam, do you have faith in me?
Charity nodded.
Then the only answer, he said, is to continue north, away from the soldiers. The Song officials can't the Song officials can't catch us up in the north. We'll be out of danger as soon as we cross the River Huai. Once things have calmed, we'll come back south to avenge these heroes. Please be assured, my lady, I will see to it that justice is done.
I have no family now, Charity thought to herself, hesitating. If I don't follow him, where is a woman like me to make a life for herself? I saw those soldiers attack my husband and burn our home with my own eyes. Had they captured me, I would have suffered a fate worse than death. Yet this man is neither friend nor relative. Should a widow like me be traveling on her own with a young man like him? But he would no doubt stop me if I tried to commit suicide.
All she knew for sure. Oh man, that's a transition. So for the thought portions where a character is thinking, they're not italicized or anything. So that's a difficult sentence transition for me. I apologize.
But he would no doubt stop me if I tried to commit suicide.
All she knew for sure was that the road ahead would be difficult and uncertain, and her guts felt twisted with worry. She had been crying for days now, and it felt as if she had no tears left.
If my lady doesn't agree with any part of my plan, then please tell me. I will do anything madam asks.
He was so accommodating that it made Charity feel guilty. Other than taking her own life, she could see no other way.
Then let's do as you suggest, she said, unable to look up.
Yan Lieh visibly rejoiced, and exclaimed,
I am forever in madam's debt, for you saved my life. Please don't mention it again, Charity interrupted. Of course.
That night they stopped at another inn in the town of Wudun, and once again Yan Lieh arranged for them to stay in the same room. He had been noticeably less reserved since Charity had agreed to go with him to the north, and occasionally he would become a little too excited. She was beginning to feel uneasy again, but as he was yet to do anything improper as such, she decided he must be trying to show his gratitude. They arrived at Jiaxing around noon the next day. It was one of the biggest cities in western Zhejiang. Oh my God. I knew this was going to be hard, but my goodness. It was one of the biggest cities in western Zhejiang, where the rice and silk trades had thrived for centuries. Known as drunken plums in ancient times and bounteous grains during the 5 dynasties, it had changed its name to Jiaxing following the Emperor Xiaozong's birth in the city.
Let's find a place to rest, Yan Lieh suggested.
Charity, however, was concerned the soldiers might find them.
It's still early, let's press on. The markets here are good, and madam's clothes are worn. We should buy you some new ones first. But you bought these only yesterday, Charity said. You call these worn? The roads are dusty. Clothes lose their shine after only a couple of days. Besides, madam is so beautiful, it wouldn't be right for you to wear anything but the finest.
Charity enjoyed his compliment, even if she could not admit it, but she looked away.
I'm in mourning. But of course, he replied at once. I understand.
Charity kept quiet. She was indeed a beautiful young woman, but her husband had never once told her so. She stole a glance at Yan Lieh. He seemed sincere. A flutter went through her, but it was tinged with anxiety. Yan Lieh asked passer-by for a place to stay, and was directed to the Elegant Waters Inn, the largest in the city. After freshening up, Yan Lieh and Charity ordered some snacks in their room and sat facing each other, eating. Charity had wanted to ask for a separate room, but did not know how to phrase it. Her cheeks alternated between bright crimson and pallid white as they ate, her worries pressing constantly against her chest.
Please make yourself comfortable, my lady. I'm just going to buy a few things. I'll be back soon.
Charity nodded.
Please don't spend too much.
Yan Lieh smiled.
It's such a shame madam is in mourning and cannot wear pearls or gems. Anyhow, I could never spend too much, even if it was my greatest desire.
And that is where we're going to call it for today. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. We're going to break into a little bit of digression here in the form of the appendix up until where we left off. I am going to need a third bookmark. Bear with me a moment. There it is. I have a third bookmark. It's a good thing I have random bits and bobs floating around on my little area here. Workspace, if you will. So, starting on page... I'm not going to tell you the page numbers.
Appendix 3. Notes on the text. Page numbers denote the first time these concepts or names are mentioned in the book. I think an actual footnote probably would have been better, but a page number is fine. I'm not going to tell you the page numbers. Sorry. Wolf Fang Club. A weapon that consists of a long wooden pole of varying lengths with one end covered in sharp spikes, reminiscent of the 16th century English weapon known as the Holy Water Sprinkler. I think it's basically a mace of some kind. The other end can be fitted with an additional point. Steel Taoist 8 trigram disc. Ku San's secret weapon, not otherwise in common use in martial arts, fighting, or in battle. The Marshes of Mount Liang, attributed to Shu Naian. Also known in English as Water Margin and Outlaws of the Marsh, among other titles, The Marshes of Mount Liang is considered one of the 4 great classical Chinese novels. Published in the 16th century during the Ming Dynasty and written in the vernacular, the story is based on a real band of outlaws who fought against the Song until the gang's surrender in AD 1121, where they started fighting with the Song against foreign invasion. I've heard of Water Margin. I think I have probably seen one of the many movie adaptations of it. Other people may have as well. Page 10. Oh, that's important. No, it's not. I'm not. That one's not important. We're good. General Yue Fei. General Yue Fei is one of China's most beloved patriots and has appeared frequently in Chinese novels, poems, and films throughout the centuries since his death in 1142. General Yue fought to regain the north after the Song capital in Kaifeng was sacked. Oh boy. General Yue fought to regain the lips, the tip of the tongue, the teeth. General Yue fought to regain the north after the Song capital in Kaifeng was sacked by the Jurchen Jin Empire, and the Emperor Qinzong was captured. But he met a tragic end when he was imprisoned and later executed by the Song government itself when the new emperor realized General Yue's success would likely dethrone him. Yue Fei's name has become synonymous in China with righteous loyalty, and he was quickly rehabilitated only some 20 years after his death. When they say was quickly rehabilitated, I'm assuming that means that the powers that be at the time made him out to be a horrible scallywag and villain, and then very quickly after those people weren't in power, or maybe while they were, he got regarded as a bit of a folk hero and not so folk hero. I guess it was politically expedient. Kind of an inverse Emperor Nero, who may not actually have been as much of a horrific scumbag as many historians have led us to believe. Most historians and accounts from the time period led us to believe, because there was a political motive in making the guy look bad. Of course, it's entirely possible that he was horrible because, power. Chu Chuji, a real historical figure and disciple of Wang Chongyang's Taoist Quanzhen sect. Jin Yong has taken creative license to deviate somewhat from the historical record, including making him only around 30 years old at the start of this book, when in fact he would have been 57 in the year 1205, which I guess is now what we know the time frame of the book is. It's the year 1205 AD. I guess. Cool. The Quanzhen sect. The Quanzhen school is a branch of Taoism that was founded by Wang Chongyang. There's a missing N there? Yeah. Chogyang. Nope. It's been consistent. I've been misreading it. It's the name Wang Chogyang is W-A-N-G space C-H-O-G-Y-A-N-G. So I'm going to read that as Wang Chogyang,
under the rule of the Jin. The Quanzhen school is a branch of Taoism that was founded by Wang Chogyang under the rule of the Jin. According to the school's own legend, Wang met two immortals in the summer of AD 1159, who trained him in secret immortality rituals. Upon a second meeting, he was given a set of 5 instructions which led him to set up residence in a grave in the Zhongnan Mountains and dedicate himself to his training for 3 years. After 7 years on the mountain, Wang met the first of his 7 disciples. Each established their own branch, ensuring the school's thinking would survive to this day. We already read the entry for the Jing Kang incident. I'm going to do it again anyway, just in case. The Jing Kang incident. In the year 1127, the Jurchen were on the march southward and sacked the Song capital of Kaifeng. During the raid, they captured the Song emperor, Qinzong, along with his father, Emperor Huizong, and several of the imperial family, effectively bringing the period of the northern Song to an end. Having lost large parts of the Chinese hinterland, what was left in the Chinese Empire fled south and settled in Linan, but the psychological damage caused by the incident was to send ripples throughout the centuries and still looms large in the Chinese cultural mind. It should be noted here that references to years in the Western Dionysian system are merely for the convenience of the reader. In the Chinese tradition, years were counted according to the lunar calendar from when an emperor declared a new era name. The name was designed to act like a motto or statement of intent for the emperor who chose it. Before the Ming and Qing dynasties, emperors often declared several era names over the course of their time in power. The Jing Kang incident is therefore named after the particular era name in which the event occurred, the meaning being serenity and vitality, reflecting a desire for peace and prosperity in such a tumultuous time politically. And the 9 springs of the underworld. This is one of the many names given to the Chinese concept of the realm of the dead, or hell. It draws influence from the Buddhist Nakara, but also folk ideas about the afterlife, and it serves as a kind of purgatory before reincarnation. The significance of the number 9 in Chinese is complex, and it is often associated with the emperor and imperial system of government. Hell was thought to be presided over by a system of courts, 10 in number, as laid out by the Jade Emperor, the first god in Chinese culture. More importantly, the number 9 also sounds like the character for lasting or abiding, and therefore likely means eternity. And that is going to do it for today. Thanks to everyone who tuned in or is tuning in future. Hi. This is your living anachronism. If somehow the data has survived through the next couple decades, great. Excellent. You're listening to Wuxia Wednesdays. I'm Fragath. I'm a narrator. I'm narrating. I am the narrator. I can't talk. This was the first chunk of the first installment of the Legends of the Condor Heroes series by Jin Yong, the first book of which is entitled A Hero Born, translated by Anna Holmwood. And I must say she did a good job. I also must say that Jin Yong did a good job. It's a fairly riveting tale. This is a slow start, but things are actually gonna slow down again, but then they're gonna speed up. When they speed up, it's going to be like 0 brakes on the train. There's gonna be like abrupt breaks, but they're going to be short. This thing moves. Knowing that was originally a serialized series makes a lot of sense. A bunch of the rhythm feels familiar, I think, to anyone who's read like a longer form serialized novel series, such as Lensman, such as stuff that would appear in, say, various science fiction pulps throughout the years, among others. So it's not wholly unfamiliar territory, but it is a bit different than what one is used to, and certainly quite different from the Hyperion series, which we're reading on Fridays. Free Read Fridays, as they are called, wherein I read short stories and indeed entire novels aloud. Right now we're going through the Hyperion Cantos, at least the first 2 books of it. Hyperion and The Fall of Hyperion by Dan Simmons. Things are very exciting on that score, and I hope people are enjoying that too, because I certainly am. Mondays are Mecha Mondays, and next up, I still haven't decided what I'm going to read next, so I'll figure it out. I'll get there eventually, probably, I hope. I'll figure out what I'm reading for next week. This Monday was something else, a bit of a digression, specific to the date, and I'm not going to be repeating that ever. Ever. At least not like that. We might do something else. But, yeah, something a little different. Anyway, with that, I'm going to scooch. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. Stay safe. Oh, yeah, and you can, if you want to catch me live, that's why these are so rough. They're very rough because I do them live, unscripted, other than there being a book and me sight reading it on the spot. I do these live, starting at about noon U.S. East Coast time, or Eastern Standard Time, whichever you prefer. I think as of now, Europe is more or less in sync. There's like a period of a couple weeks where they aren't. So they're at whatever daylight savings equivalent they've got. Anyway, with that, I'm going to scooch. Thanks again. Stay safe, stay sane, and be decent to each other. And yeah, watch some cool kung fu movies. They're fun. Or they can be. Anyway, until next time.